Hi everyone! Tonight we're stepping into the shadows of 1700s Japan, where government promises meant nothing and families were torn apart by carefully crafted lies. Drop your city and time zone in the comments below. It's fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle atmosphere, and let's walk together into a story that will break your heart. You're standing in a small village outside Edo in 1726. The morning mist clings to rice paddies like forgotten prayers, and somewhere in the distance a government official is about to destroy your life with a smile. Your daughter Yuki is 17, beautiful as cherry blossoms, and you're about to make the worst decision of your life because you believe what authority tells you. The official's voice carries across the village square like honey poured over broken glass. Your daughters, he announces, will serve the great houses of Edo. They'll learn proper manners, earn good wages, and return to you as refined young women ready for honourable marriages. He holds up an official document, its red seal gleaming like dried blood in the morning sun. You feel hope bloom in your chest. Yuki could have a better life. She could escape the endless cycle of planting rice and wondering if this year's harvest will be enough. The official's kimono is silk, real silk, and his words sound like salvation wrapped in government authority. They'll be safe, he continues, and you notice how his eyes don't quite meet yours when he says it. Protected in the pleasure district of Yoshiwara, learning the arts of music, poetry, and dance. Think of it as finishing school for your daughters. Yoshiwara. You've heard whispers about this place, but the official makes it sound like a cultural academy. The other mothers around you nod eagerly. Mrs. Tanaka clutches her daughter's hand and whispers, "This is your chance, Hana. Don't waste it." The contract is written in formal Japanese that might as well be Chinese to your rice farming eyes. You trace the characters with your finger, trusting that authority knows best. The official explains the terms quickly. Your daughter will send money home, she'll write letters, and after 5 years of service she'll return with enough savings to marry well. 5 years? It seems like forever and no time at all. You watch Yuki's face as she listens. She's trying to look brave, but you can see the uncertainty flickering behind her eyes like candlelight in wind. "Mama," she whispers, "will you visit me?" The official laughs, a sound like coins dropping into an empty box. Family visits might disturb the girl's education, but don't worry, they'll write every month. Every month. You picture Yuki's careful handwriting telling you about her new life, maybe even including money to help buy medicine for your husband's cough. The future suddenly looks brighter than it has in years. You sign the contract with a brush that feels heavier than it should. Your daughter's name beside yours looks so small on the official paper, like a butterfly pinned to a board. The ink dries before you can change your mind. When do they leave her, you ask? Tomorrow at dawn, the carriage will take them to their new lives. New lives. The phrase echoes in your mind as you walk home with Yuki, neither of you speaking. That night, you help her pack her few belongings into a small wooden box, her best kimono, a hair ornament her grandmother gave her, and a small cloth doll you made when she was little. "Keep this," you tell her, pressing the doll into her hands, "so you remember home." She nods but doesn't trust her voice to speak. You both know something is ending, even if you don't understand what's beginning. The next morning arrives too quickly. The carriage waits in the village centre like a black mouth ready to swallow your daughter whole. Other girls cluster around it. Some excited, some terrified, all trusting their family's decisions. You hug Yuki one last time, breathing in the scent of her hair, trying to memorize the feeling of her arms around you. "Write soon," you whisper. "I will, Mama, I promise." The carriage door closes with a sound like a coffin lid. Through the small window you see Yuki's face growing smaller and smaller as the wheels begin to turn. She waves until she disappears completely around the bend in the road. You stand there long after the dust settles, watching the empty road and listening to the other mothers' quiet sobs. Mrs. Tanaka touches your shoulder. "They'll be fine," she says, but her voice shakes like autumn leaves. That was the last time you saw your daughter's face in sunlight. You return home to a house that feels too quiet, too empty. Yuki's sleeping mat is still folded in the corner where she left it. Her rice bowl sits clean and unused on the shelf, waiting for a meal that will never come. Your husband looks up from his morning tea, his eyes asking the question neither of you wants to voice. She'll write so soon, you tell him, but those words taste like ash. Meanwhile, 60 miles away in Edo, your daughter is discovering the truth behind the beautiful lies. The carriage has stopped in front of massive wooden gates decorated with intricate carvings of flowers and birds. Everything looks exactly as the official described, elegant, refined, like something from a fairy tale. Yuki steps out with the other girls, their small bundles clutched in nervous hands. The entrance to Yoshiwara is indeed magnificent, with lanterns hanging like paper stars and the sound of shamisen music drifting through the air. For a moment she allows herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this really will be the education she was promised. A woman approaches them, beautiful, her kimono more expensive than anything Yuki has ever seen. Her smile is perfect, practiced, like a mask she's worn so long it's become her face. Welcome, girls. I am Mother. Okiku, I will take care of you now. The word mother should be comforting, but something about the way she says it makes Yuki's stomach clench. Mother Okiku's eyes are cold as winter stones, and praising each girl like livestock at market. First, we must prepare you properly, Mother Okiku continues. Your old clothes, your old names, your old lives. Leave them at the gate. You are being reborn. Reborn. The word echoes strangely as the girls are led through corridors that smell of incense and something else, something desperate and sweet that Yuki can't identify. Their small bundles are taken away. For safe keeping, Mother Okiku explains, but Yuki watches her cloth doll disappear into a box with all the other reminders of home. The room they're brought to is beautiful and terrible. Silk screens divide sleeping areas, each one barely large enough for a single futon. The walls are painted with scenes of court life, elegant ladies playing instruments, writing poetry, serving tea to invisible masters. This will be your new world, Mother Okiku announces. You will learn to please men of refinement and taste. Your earnings will pay for your room, your food, your beautiful clothes, your education in the arts. Earnings, education, the words the government official used, but they sound different now, sharper, like knife blade wrapped in silk. The girl beside Yuki raises her trembling hand. When can we write to our families? Mother Okiku's smile never wavers. When you have learned to write properly, when you have something worthy to tell them. For now, focus on your lessons. The lessons begin immediately. How to walk with tiny shuffling steps that make your hips sway. How to pour sake without spilling a drop. How to laugh at things that aren't funny and smile when your heart is breaking. How to paint your face until you look like a beautiful ghost of yourself. Yuki learns that her new name is Sakura, cherry blossom. It suits you, Mother Okiku says, applying white makeup to her face with practiced strokes. Delicate, beautiful, and gone too quickly. Gone too quickly. The words settle in Yuki's stomach like stones. At night, lying on her narrow futon, she listens to the other girls cry softly into their silk pillows. Some are younger than her, barely 15, their faces still round with childhood. They whisper about home, about mothers who are probably lighting incense at Buddhist altars and praying for their daughter's safety. How long until we can go home? Whispers the girl next to her, a tiny thing from a fishing village whose new name is Chrysanthemum. 5 years, Yuki whispers back. The contract said 5 years. But already something in her heart suspects that 5 years might as well be forever. Back in your village, you count the days like prayer beads. 3 weeks have passed since the carriage took your daughter away. You walk to the village centre every morning, hoping to see a messenger with a letter, bearing Yuki's careful handwriting. Mrs. Tanka finds you there on the 20th day, both of you staring at the empty road. Perhaps they're too busy with their studies to write, she suggests, but her voice lacks conviction. You nod, but doubt is growing in your chest like a tumour. At night you dream of Yuki calling your name, but you can never quite reach her through the darkness. 6 weeks pass. The maple leaves are turning red as blood, and still no letter arrives. You've worn a path in the dirt from walking to the village centre each morning, hoping for news that never comes. Your husband has stopped asking about letters, but you catch him staring at Yuki's empty rice bowl with eyes that hold too much understanding. Meanwhile, in Yoshiwara, your daughter is learning lessons that were never mentioned in any government contract. Tonight is what Mother Okiku calls her debut, the night she truly begins earning her keep. Yuki sits in front of a bronze mirror, watching an older girl paint her face with the white makeup that transforms the young women into living dolls. "Don't think about home tonight," the girl advises quietly. Her name was once something else, but now she's called Evening Glory and she's been here 3 years. 3 years, and her letters home stopped after the first month. It only makes it harder. Yuki's hands shake as Evening Glory applies the final touches of red to her lips. In the mirror, she sees a stranger wearing her face. Beautiful, painted, empty. The reflection looks like a ghost of someone who died quietly and unnoticed. "I want to write to my mother," Yuki whispers. Evening Glory's hand pauses. Paper costs money. Ink costs money. The messenger costs money. Until you earn enough to pay Mother Okiku for all your debts, there are no letters. Debts. This is the first time anyone has mentioned debts. What debts? The cost of bringing you here, your room, your food, your makeup and beautiful kimono. The price of your training. Evening Glory's voice is matter-of-fact, like discussing the weather. Most girls work for 2 or 3 years before they earn enough to send even one letter home. 2 or 3 years. The room suddenly feels smaller. The painted screens like prison walls, decorated with beautiful lies. A soft bell chimes somewhere in the building. Evening Glory rises gracefully, her movements practiced as a dancer's. It's time. The corridor outside their room fills with the sound of silk rustling and wooden sandals clicking against polished floors. Other girls emerge from behind their screens, some barely older than children, others worn down by years of smiling when they want to scream. Yuki follows them through passages lit by paper lanterns that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The shadows look like reaching hands, grasping at nothing. The sound of shamisen music grows louder, accompanied by men's laughter that echoes off the walls like a pack of hungry wolves. They enter a large room filled with cushions and low tables. Men in expensive silk robes recline on the cushions, their faces flushed with sake and anticipation. Some are old enough to be grandfathers, others young enough to be brothers. All of them look at the entering girls like they are examining merchandise. "Remember," Mother Okiku whispers as she passes, "smile, always smile." Yuki arranges her face into the expression she's been practicing, demure, available, grateful for attention. Inside her chest, her heart pounds like a caged bird throwing itself against the bars of its prison. A merchant with gold teeth beckons her over. His breath smells like pickled fish and old sake. "What's your name, little flower?" "Sakura," she replies, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cherry blossom, how perfect." His hand reaches out to touch her painted cheek, and she forces herself not to flinch. "Are you new?" She nods, not trusting her voice. "Even better." His laugh makes her skin crawl. "I do love fresh petals." The evening stretches on like a nightmare that won't end. Yuki pours sake with hands that want to shake, laughs at jokes that aren't funny, and pretends that the merchant's wandering hands are welcome touches. Every moment feels like drowning in silk and forced smiles. When it's finally over, when the last drunken customer has been led away by other girls whose names were also taken at the door, Yuki sits alone in her small space behind the painted screen. She pulls out the small cloth doll she managed to hide in her sleeve before Mother Okiku's women took everything else away. The doll's fabric face is stained with tears she didn't realize she was crying. Back in your village, you light incense at the family altar and whisper prayers for your daughter's safety. The stick burns down to ash while you kneel on the hard floor, your knees aching but your heart aching more. "Please, Buddha," you whisper to the darkness, "let her be safe. Let her remember that she is loved." 60 miles away, your daughter clutches a cloth doll and whispers the same prayer, but with different words. "Please, let my mother forgive me for the woman I'm becoming." The incense smoke from your altar drifts toward the ceiling like released souls, carrying messages that will never be delivered and love that will never find its destination. Neither of you knows that forgiveness was never the question. Neither of you understands yet that you're both victims of the same beautiful lie, both prisoners of the same system that profits from separating mothers from daughters and then selling the pieces back to men who mistake money for affection. 3 months have passed since the carriage took your daughter away. Autumn has surrendered to winter, and still your mailbox remains as empty as your arms. You've stopped setting out Yuki's rice bowl at mealtime, but only because the sight of it unused makes your husband's cough worse, and your heart feel like it's been hollowed out with a rusty spoon. Mrs. Tanaka visits you more often now. Both of you pretend it's for tea and gossip, but really it's because misery shared weighs slightly less than misery carried alone. She brings her swing, and you bring yours, and together you sit in silence that speaks louder than words. The government official said they'd write every month, Mrs. Tanaka finally says, her needle pausing in mid-stitch. Perhaps the letters are delayed, you reply, but the words feel hollow as bamboo tubes. Winter roads can be treacherous. You both know you're lying to yourselves, but the alternative, admitting that something is terribly wrong, feels too dangerous to voice. It would make the fear real, and real fear might kill hope entirely. Your husband enters the room, his footsteps heavier than they used to be. He's aged years in these 3 months, his hair growing greyer and his back more bent. The cough that started as a minor irritation now rattles in his chest like dice in a cup. "Any word?" he asks, though he already knows the answer from your faces. "Not today," you tell him, "but tomorrow perhaps. Tomorrow it's become your favourite lie, the one you tell yourself every night when sleep feels impossible. Tomorrow there will be a letter. Tomorrow you'll learn that Yuki is safe and happy and learning beautiful arts in the capital city. But tonight, in the darkness of your small house, you allow yourself to remember the government official's eyes, how they never quite met yours when he spoke about safety and protection. You remember the way his smile seemed painted on, like the masks actors wear in kabuki theatre. You remember, and you begin to understand that tomorrow might be just another word for never. Meanwhile, in Yoshiwara, your daughter has learned new words that weren't in any government contract. Words like debt bondage and indentured servitude. Words like contract price and customer fees. Words that taste like iron and shame when spoken aloud. Tonight she sits with the Evening Glory and 3 other girls whose real names have been buried so deep they sometimes forget them in dreams. They're supposed to be preparing for the evening's entertainment, but instead they're whispering about the impossible mathematics of their situation. "Mother Okiku showed me the books today," Evening Glory says quietly. "My debt has grown larger, not smaller. This makes no sense to Yuki. You work every night. You earn money." "Yes, but I also eat food, sleep in a room, wear makeup, use hairpins. Everything costs money and the costs always exceed the earnings." Evening Glory's voice is flat, emotionless, like someone reading a death sentence. "Last month I earned 6 ryo. My expenses were 8 ryo. So I owe Mother Okiku 2 more ryo than I did before." The other girls nod with the grim understanding of people who've discovered. They're trapped in a beautiful cage with no key. Some have been here for 4 years, 5 years, longer, and their debts continue to grow like tumours, fed by the very work that was supposed to free them. "What about our families?" whispers to Chrysanthemum, the tiny girl from the fishing village. "Don't they expect us to send money home?" Evening Glory looks at her with the eyes that hold too much knowledge. "The families receive explanations, letters explaining that we're still in training, still learning, still not quite ready to begin sending money home. But soon, the letters promise, always soon. These letters, the ones going to families, are written by Mother Okiku's clerks, signed with names the girls barely recognise as their own anymore. The families read these letters and feel relief that their daughters are safe and progressing in their studies. But my mother will know it's not my handwriting," Yuki protests. "Will she?" Evening Glory asks gently. "Has she ever seen you write formal Japanese characters, the kind used in official correspondence?" Yuki falls silent. Her mother can barely read, and formal writing might as well be a foreign language. A forged letter in elegant script could easily pass for the refined handwriting her daughter would learn in her new educated life. The bell chimes. Time to paint their faces and pretend to be happy. As Evening Glory helps Yuki with her makeup, she whispers one more terrible truth. Some girls do eventually earn enough to buy their freedom, but by then they're too old, too tired, too ashamed to go home. They become mothers themselves, managing newer, younger girls who arrive in carriages, believing government promises. Yuki stares at her reflection in the bronze mirror. The white-painted face staring back could belong to anyone, could belong to no one. She wonders if her real face, the one her mother kissed goodbye, still exists somewhere underneath the cosmetics, or if it's been painted away forever. In your village, you blow out that evening candle and try to sleep, but sleep brings dreams of empty carriages and locked doors, of letters that burst into ash when you try to read them. You dream of your daughter calling your name, but her voice grows fainter each night, as if she's moving farther and farther away from you with each passing hour. 6 months now. The snow has melted, and still no letter comes. You've developed a routine of denial that feels almost comfortable in its familiarity. Each morning you check for mail that doesn't exist. Each afternoon you find new explanations for the silence. Each evening you light incense and pray to gods who seem to have forgotten your daughter's name. Mrs. Tanaka's visits have become daily occurrences. Neither of you admits that you're keeping vigil together, two mothers anchored by the same unspoken dread. Today she brings news that makes your blood feel like winter water in your veins. "I spoke with Mrs. Sato from the next village," she says quietly, her hands wrapped around her teacup like she's trying to absorb its warmth. Her daughter was taken to the same place last year. She received 3 letters, then nothing. 3 letters. The number sits between you like a physical thing, heavy and cold, Yunsu. What did the letters say? Beautiful things, wonderful things, how happy her daughter was, how well she was learning, how proud she was to be serving such refined gentlemen. Mrs. Tanaka's voice drops to barely above a whisper. But Mrs. Sato said something strange. The handwriting in the 3rd letter was different from the first 2. Different handwriting. Your mouth goes dry. Different how? More practiced. More elegant. As if suddenly her daughter had become a master calligrapher overnight. You stare into your tea, watching the leaves settle at the bottom, like dark prophecies. The government officials' words echo in your memory. They'll learn proper writing, formal Japanese, all the refinements of culture. It made sense then, makes terrible sense now, but in an entirely different way. "Mrs. Tanaka," you say slowly, "do you think our daughters are really learning calligraphs?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from burning letters. Neither of you answers, because the answer lives in a place too dark to visit during daylight hours. Meanwhile in Yoshiwara, your daughter has learned the arithmetic of heartbreak. She knows now that her debt isn't just about money, it's about mathematics designed to never resolve. For every ryo she earns, Mother Okiku finds new expenses to deduct. New kimonos are needed for special occasions. Makeup costs have increased. Room and board prices have risen. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom, Evening Glory explains during one of their whispered conversations. No matter how much water you pour in, the level never rises. Yuki has stopped asking about letters home. She's learned that questioning Mother Okiku leads to new punishments disguised as business expenses. Ask too many questions and suddenly you owe money for behaviour correction lessons. Cry too often and you're charged for emotional stability training. Tonight a new girl arrives. She can't be more than 15 with eyes like Yuki's were 6 months ago. Bright with hope and trust in adult promises. Her name is something beautiful from a mountain village, but by tomorrow she'll be called Peony or Iris or whatever flower Mother Okiku decides suits her marketability. Yuki watches the girl's intake process and sees herself. The careful removal of personal belongings, the gentle explanations about debt and earnings, the introduction to the beautiful rooms and silk clothes that come with invisible price tags. She looks just like you did, Evening Glory murmurs. The girl does look like Yuki once did. Before 6 months of painted smiles and forced laughter carved new lines around her eyes. Before she learned that survival sometimes means becoming someone your mother wouldn't recognize. "I want to warn her," Yuki whispers. "About what, the truth?" Evening Glory shakes her head sadly. The truth would break her spirit before she's strong enough to survive this place. Sometimes lies are kinder than honesty. But Yuki remembers her own first night, the terror and confusion that could have been lessened with honest warnings. She approaches the new girl during the evening preparation time. "What's your real name?" Yuki asks quietly. The girl looks surprised by the question. "Midori, from the mountain village near—" "Keep that name secret," Yuki interrupts gently. "Write it in your heart where they can't take it away. Remember who you were before you became who they need you to be." Midori's eyes widen with the first crack of understanding. "What do you mean?" "You'll understand soon enough. But when you do understand, remember that your mother loves you. Remember that none of this is your fault. Remember that somewhere beyond these walls, there's still sunlight that doesn't cost money and air that doesn't smell like incense and desperation." That night, Yuki lies on her narrow futon and counts the months since she left home. 6 months feels like 6 years, like 6 lifetimes. She wonders if her mother's hair has grown greyer, if her father's cough has worsened, if they still set a place for her at the dinner table out of habit and hope. She wonders if they dream about her, and if those dreams are nightmares. Back in your village, you do dream about Yuki. But your dreams have changed. Instead of seeing her learning elegant arts in beautiful rooms, you dream of her trapped behind painted screens, calling your name in a voice that grows weaker each night. You wake from these dreams gasping, your heart pounding like footsteps running toward a destination that no longer exists. Your husband reaches for your hand in the darkness, and you realize his fingers are wet with tears he's trying to hide. "She's alive," he whispers, though neither of you has spoken aloud about the alternative. "She's alive," you agree, though the words feel like prayers shouted into an empty temple. Outside your window, the morning star appears in the grey sky, bright and distant and impossible to reach. The 1-year anniversary arrives like a funeral date you've been dreading. 365 days since you watched your daughter disappear around the bend in that black carriage. 365 nights of lighting incense for a girl who might as well have vanished into the spirit world. Mrs. Tanaka finds you at the village shrine, kneeling before the altar, with offerings that feel more like desperate bribes than gifts. Rice for prosperity, flowers for beauty, sake for the spirits to carry your prayers to wherever daughters go when they disappear behind government promises. "I received a letter," she says quietly, and your heart stops beating for exactly 3 seconds. "From Hannah?" Mrs. Tanaka nods, but her face holds no joy. She pulls a folded paper from her sleeve, elegant handwriting on expensive paper. The kind of formal correspondence that screams refinement and education. "Read it to me," you whisper, though part of you doesn't want to hear the words. Mrs. Tanaka's voice shakes as she reads, "Honoured Mother, I write to inform you of my continued progress in the refined arts. My teachers are pleased with my development in music, poetry and social graces. I am learning so much about serving distinguished gentlemen with proper etiquette. The other girls here have become like sisters to me. Please do not worry about my welfare, as I am well cared for, and my future prospects grow brighter each day. I hope to visit home when my education is complete. Your dutiful daughter, Hana." The letter sounds beautiful. It sounds exactly like what a loving daughter would write to reassure worried parents. It sounds like everything the government official promised would happen. It sounds absolutely nothing like Hana. "This handwriting," you say slowly, taking the letter in your trembling hands. "It's too perfect. Hana's writing was messier, more childlike." "I thought the same thing," Mrs. Tanaka admits. "But then I told myself that of course her writing would improve. That's what education does." But deep in your heart, where truth lives regardless of what your mind wants to believe, you know this letter wasn't written by your neighbour's daughter. It was written by someone who knows how to craft beautiful lies in elegant script. "Mrs. Tanaka," you say carefully, "what if we went to Edo? What if we tried to visit them?" The suggestion hangs between you like a bridge made of spider silk. Beautiful, fragile, possibly strong enough to hold hope, but just as likely to break under the weight of reality. Mrs. Tanaka stares at the letter in your hands. The official said visits weren't allowed during their education period. The official said many things. You both fall silent, contemplating a journey that would cost money. You don't have to find daughters who might not want to be found, or might not be allowed to be found. That evening you show the letter to your husband. He reads it slowly, his lips moving with each character, his face growing more troubled with each line. "This doesn't sound like any daughter I've ever known," he says finally. "What do you mean?" "Listen to the words. Serving distinguished gentlemen with proper etiquette. What kind of cultural education involves serving men? And why would she mention that specifically unless—" He trails off, the unfinished thought poisoning the air between you. Unless. The word opens doors you've kept locked for a year, doors that lead to possibilities too terrible to examine in full daylight. Meanwhile, in Yoshiwara, your daughter has learned that letters home are indeed written, just not by the girls they're supposed to be from. She watches Mother Okiku's clerks compose these monthly reassurances, copying practiced phrases from templates that vary only in small details. The families need hope, Mother Okiku explains to her clerks during one of their letter-writing sessions. Hope keeps them from asking uncomfortable questions. Hope keeps them from making unfortunate visits. Yuki stands in the shadows, listening to her own fictional correspondence being dictated. Tell the rice farmer's family that Sakura is excelling in traditional dance. Mention that she's made friends with girls from good families. Add something about how grateful she is for this opportunity. The clerk's brush moves across expensive paper, creating beautiful lines in handwriting that could belong to an educated young woman who never existed. The letter will be signed Yuki in characters that look nothing like the simple scrawl she once used to sign her name to childhood drawings. "What about money?" the clerk asks. "Should we mention sending money home soon?" "Always soon," Mother Okiku replies. "Next month, perhaps the month after. Soon enough to maintain hope, distant enough to excuse continued delay." These letters are dispatched with government seals and official stamps, carried by messengers who believe they're delivering legitimate correspondence from cultural students to their families. The system is perfect in its cruelty. Even the messengers are unwitting participants in the deception. That night, Yuki sits with the new girl, Midori, who has just learned the truth about her situation. Midori's tears fall silently onto her silk kimono, each drop disappearing into the expensive fabric like hopes being absorbed by beautiful lies. "My mother will be waiting for letters," Midori whispers. "Your mother will receive letters," Yuki tells her gently, "just not from you." But won't she know the difference? Yuki remembers asking the same question months ago, when hope still felt possible. The letters will sound like the daughter she wants you to become, not the daughter you actually are. They'll be written by someone who understands what mothers need to hear to keep believing in government promises. Midori's sobs are muffled by her sleeve, but her shoulders shake with the effort of staying quiet. Crying too loudly is another punishable offence, another item that can be added to the endless debt. "I want to go home," she whispers. "We all do," Yuki replies. But wanting and being able are different things entirely. Outside the painted screens, the shamisen music begins its nightly performance, calling the girls to prepare for another evening of pretending to be happy while men who could be their grandfathers pay for the privilege of their company. In your village, you blow out the evening candle and try to understand how a year can pass without a single word from your own daughter, while your neighbour receives monthly letters from hers. You try to solve this mystery, but the mathematics of maternal love don't account for the arithmetic of organised deception. 18 months have passed since the carriage swallowed your daughter, and you've become a different person entirely. The woman who once believed government promises has been replaced by someone who counts days like wounds and measures time in accumulated silences. Mrs. Tanaka still receives letters, monthly arrivals that come with the regularity of seasonal rains. Each one describes Hana's continued education, her growing refinement, her preparation for an eventual honourable return home. Each one is signed with handwriting that grows more beautiful and less familiar with every correspondence. You receive nothing. The difference haunts you like a ghost that speaks only in questions. Why does Mrs. Tanaka's daughter write while yours remains silent? Are you being punished for some unknown transgression? Did you fail to raise Yuki properly, leaving her without the skills or motivation to maintain contact with home? These thoughts poison your sleep and contaminate your prayers. You've begun to wonder if maternal love can be measured by the frequency of letters received, if the depth of a daughter's devotion can be calculated by counting monthly correspondences. Perhaps Yuki is too busy with advanced studies, Mrs. Tanaka suggests during one of her visits, though her voice lacks conviction. Perhaps she's learning skills that require complete concentration. Advanced studies. The phrase has become a bandage you both apply to wounds that won't stop bleeding. But bandages don't heal injuries, they just hide them until infection sets in. Today brings news that changes everything. Mrs. Yamamoto from the coastal village arrives with her sister, both women travelling on foot for 2 days to reach your village. Their faces carry the weight of terrible knowledge. The kind of burden that can only be shared, never relieved. "We need to talk," Mrs. Yamamoto says simply, "about our daughters." Your stomach clenches. Mrs. Yamamoto's daughter Rei was taken 6 months after Yuki, part of a second recruitment that promised even better opportunities in Edo's finest cultural establishments. The 4 of you gather in your small main room, tea growing cold in cups nobody wants to drink. Mrs. Yamamoto reaches into her travelling bundle and pulls out a stack of letters, at least a dozen pieces of correspondence, all bearing elegant calligraphy and official seals. Rei has been writing regularly, she begins, then pauses. But yesterday, I discovered something that changes everything. She unfolds one of the letters, pointing to a specific line. I am learning advanced techniques in customer service and client satisfaction. The words hang in the air like incense smoke that refuses to disperse. Customer service, client satisfaction. These aren't terms used in cultural education or traditional arts training. I showed this letter to the Buddhist priest in our village, Mrs. Yamamoto continues. He's travelled to Edo many times. He knows the Seizuko, language used in different districts, different establishments. The pause before establishments carries more weight than thunder. What did he tell you? Mrs. Tanaka whispers. Mrs. Yamamoto's sister speaks for the first time. He said this language is used in the pleasure districts, places where young women serve men in ways that have nothing to do with cultural education. The truth lands in your small room like a boulder thrown through rice paper screens. It tears through everything you've built to protect yourselves from precisely this understanding. Pleasure districts. The euphemism doesn't soften the reality it conceals. Your daughters, Yuki, Hana, Rei, and dozens of others, weren't taken for cultural education. They were taken for an entirely different kind of service, one that government officials would never describe honestly to village mothers. But the contracts, Mrs. Tanaka protests weakly, the official promises, the government seals, all real, Mrs. Yamamoto confirms, but legal doesn't mean honest. Authorized doesn't mean ethical. You think about Yuki's silence, the complete absence of any correspondence. Suddenly, it makes terrible sense. If Mrs. Tanaka and Mrs. Yamamoto receive carefully crafted letters designed to maintain illusions, why would you receive nothing? The answer arrives like a knife between your ribs, because someone decided you don't deserve even beautiful lies. There's more, Mrs. Yamamoto says quietly. The priest told us that some families are told their daughters died of illness during their first winter in Edo. Died of illness. Your blood turns to ice water. Why would they say that? Because it's cleaner than the truth. A dead daughter becomes a tragedy that families can mourn and eventually accept. A daughter trapped in circumstances she can't escape becomes a problem that generates questions and potential investigations. Mrs. Tanaka's face has gone white as winter snow. Are you saying that some of our daughters might be... I'm saying we don't know, Mrs. Yamamoto interrupts gently. And that's exactly the problem. We've been kept ignorant by design, fed hope as a way to ensure our silence. The room falls quiet except for the sound of hearts breaking in different rhythms. You look around at these other mothers, women who trusted the same official, signed the same contracts, believed the same promises, and realize that you're all casualties of a war you didn't know was being fought. What do we do, you ask, though part of you fears the answer. Mrs. Yamamoto folds the letters carefully, her movements precise despite her trembling hands. We go to Edo, we demand answers, we find our daughters or learn the truth about why we can't. Go to Edo. The suggestion is terrifying and necessary in equal measure. It means abandoning the comfortable lies that have sustained you for 18 months. It means confronting possibilities that might destroy what little hope you have left. But it also means you might see Yuki again, might hold her, might tell her that none of this is her fault, might bring her home where letters aren't necessary because love doesn't require written proof of its existence. When? Mrs. Tanaka asks. As soon as we can gather enough money for the journey, Mrs. Yamamoto replies. However long that takes. You realise this might be the first honest timeline anyone has given you since the day your daughter disappeared into a government carriage. That night, you tell your husband about the meeting, about the letters that reveal too much, and the silence that conceals even more. He listens without interruption, his face growing older with each word. I've suspected, he admits quietly. The cough that won't heal, the dreams that wake me screaming, I think my body knew what my mind refused to accept. Will you come with us to Edo? He looks toward the empty corner where Yuki's sleeping mat once lay. I'll come, even if we find nothing but graves to visit. I'll come. Graves to visit. The phrase echoes in your mind as you try to sleep, but sleep brings no peace. Only dreams of daughters calling from behind locked doors that you're powerless to open. 2 months later, you've managed to gather enough money for the journey to Edo by selling everything of value you own. Your mother's silver hair ornaments, your husband's good winter coat, even the small wooden statue of Buddha that has guarded your family altar for 3 generations. Each sale feels like severing a finger, but desperation makes people capable of amputations they never thought possible. Mrs. Tanaka sold her grandmother's silk obi. Mrs. Yamamoto traded her family's prize rooster and 3 laying hens. Together, you've assembled enough coins to pay for cart passage to the capital and modest lodging for 3 days. Long enough, you hope, to find answers, or at least evidence of what you're not finding. The night before departure, you pack a small bundle containing Yuki's childhood doll, the one she couldn't take with her because the carriage had limited space. You've kept it in the corner where her sleeping mat used to be, moving it carefully when you clean, talking to it sometimes when the silence becomes unbearable. Maybe she'll want this back, you tell your husband, though you both know you're preparing for possibilities that range from joyful reunion to closure of the most final kind. Your husband has grown thinner during these months of preparation, his cough worsening with worry and the approach of another winter. But his eyes hold a determination that reminds you why you fell in love with him, the quiet strength that emerges when everything else has been stripped away. Whatever we find, he says, we find it together. The journey to Edo takes 2 days by ox cart, travelling roads that feel like pathways to judgment. You sit with the other mothers in uncomfortable silence, each woman lost in private fears about what awaits at your destination. Mrs. Tanaka clutches her latest letter from Hana, the one that mentions expanding her service skills to accommodate distinguished guests with specialised requirements. None of you discuss what those words might actually mean. Edo appears on the horizon, like a creature made of smoke and ambition, larger than your village could accommodate in its wildest imagination. The city stretches beyond sight, filled with more people than you've seen in your entire life combined. The cart driver, a practical man who's made this journey countless times, notices your expressions of overwhelmed amazement. First time in the capital? We're looking for our daughters, Mrs. Yamamoto explains. They're our students in the cultural district. Something shifts in the driver's expression, a subtle hardening around his eyes that suggests he's heard this particular story before. The cultural district, he repeats carefully. Which establishment? The question implies knowledge none of you want to acknowledge. If our daughters are in cultural schools, why would he ask about establishments? We have the address from the government contracts, you say, pulling out the carefully preserved documents. The Yoshiwara Cultural Academy for Young Ladies. The driver's face goes completely neutral, the kind of blank expression people wear when they know terrible things they can't say aloud. Yoshiwara, he says after a long pause. I can take you to the gates. The gates. Not the school, not the academy. The gates. As if Yoshiwara is a place you enter rather than a building you visit. The journey through Edo's streets reveals a world that seems designed to confuse and overwhelm country visitors. Signs in scripts you can't read advertise services you can't identify. Merchants sell goods you've never imagined existed. People dress in clothes that cost more than your family's annual rice income. When the cart finally stops, you find yourselves facing gates that are indeed magnificent. Tall wooden barriers decorated with intricate carvings and painted in colours that seem too bright for daylight. Lanterns hang unlit during the day, but you can imagine how they transform this entrance into something magical when darkness falls. A guard stands at the gates, wearing clothes that mark him as someone with authority. His smile is professional, practiced, like armour worn so long it's become a second skin. "Good afternoon, honoured ladies. How may I assist you?" Mrs. Yamamoto steps forward with the confidence of someone who's rehearsed this moment in her mind hundreds of times. "We're here to visit our daughters. They're students at the Yoshiwara Cultural Academy." The guard's smile never wavers, but something in his posture suggests this conversation happens more often than you'd expect. "I'm afraid student visits aren't permitted during the education period. However, I can arrange for messages to be delivered." Messages delivered. Not visits arranged, not reunion facilitated. Messages delivered. As if your daughters are prisoners who can receive mail but not visitors. "When will the education period end?" Mrs. Tanaka asks. "That depends on each student's individual progress," the guard replies smoothly. "Some require more intensive training than others." Intensive training. The euphemisms are becoming weapons designed to wound without appearing to attack. "We've travelled 2 days to get here," you say, trying to keep desperation out of your voice. "Surely we could see them for just a few minutes." The guard shakes his head with what appears to be genuine sympathy. "I understand your desire, honoured mother, but the rules exist to protect the student's educational progress. Emotional disruptions can set back months of careful development." Emotional disruptions. As if a mother's love is a disease that interferes with learning. "Could you at least tell us if they're healthy?" Mrs. Yamamoto asks. "If they're safe?" "All students receive excellent care," the guard assures you. "Regular meals, beautiful lodging, comprehensive medical attention, when needed." When needed. The phrase suggests that medical attention is sometimes required, but not why. You stand before these beautiful gates, 3 mothers who've spent months planning this journey, and realise you're facing a wall more impenetrable than the decorated wood suggests. Every question receives an answer that sounds helpful while providing no actual information. "There must be someone we can speak to, Mrs. Tanaka insists. "A supervisor, an administrator?" "Mother Okiku handles all family communications," the guard explains, "but she's currently attending to urgent business. Perhaps you could return tomorrow?" Tomorrow. The word that's haunted your lives for 20 months, always promising resolution that never arrives. As you walk away from the gates, none of you speaks aloud the truth that's becoming impossible to ignore. We're not wanted here, and our daughters might not be students in any meaningful sense of the word. That evening, in a cheap inn that smells of stale rice wine and other people's disappointments, you lie awake listening to Mrs. Tanaka cry quietly into her pillow. Through the thin walls, you can hear Mrs. Yamamoto whispering prayers that sound more like arguments with gods who've stopped listening. Outside your window, the lights of Yoshiwara flicker in the distance like stars fallen to earth, beautiful, unreachable, and somehow ominous in their splendour. Morning brings a different guard at the Yoshiwara gates, an older man whose face carries the weight of too many conversations with desperate mothers. When you approach with the same request to see your daughters, he glances around nervously before speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. "You should speak with old man Tanuki," he says quietly. "He runs a tea house 3 streets north of here. Tell him Watanabe sent you." Watanabe. The first name anyone has given you in this city of careful anonymity. The first suggestion that someone might be willing to help rather than deflect. Old man Tanuki's tea house exists in the shadow between Yoshiwara's glamorous facade and the rest of Edo's everyday reality. It's small, dark, and filled with the kind of people who look like they're hiding from something. The proprietor himself appears ancient enough to have witnessed the city's construction, his face mapped with wrinkles that suggest he's seen everything humanity can devise. When you mention Watanabe's name, his expression changes from polite disinterest to something approaching sympathy. He gestures for you to sit at a table in the back corner, away from other customers who might overhear conversations that shouldn't be repeated. "You're looking for daughters," he says. It's not a question. "Yes, they're students at the Cultural Academy." Old man Tanuki pours tea with hands that shake slightly. Whether from age or emotion, you can't determine. "There is no Cultural Academy," he says simply. "There never was." The words hit you like stones thrown by invisible hands. No cultural academy. Everything you've believed for 20 months collapses into dust that settles in your lungs and makes breathing difficult. But the contracts, Mrs. Tanaka whispers. The government official. The contracts are real. The official was authorized by legitimate authorities. But the purpose, he pauses, searching for words that will convey truth without completely destroying hope. Your daughters serve men who pay for companionship. Some services are traditional entertainment. Others are more intimate. Intimate. The euphemism doesn't soften the reality it describes. Your Yuki, your sweet girl who blushed when boys looked at her, is being forced to provide intimacy to strangers who treat affection like a commodity to be purchased. Can we see them? You ask, though your voice sounds like it's coming from someone else's throat. Old man Tanuki shakes his head slowly. The girls rarely leave the district. When they do, they're accompanied by guards. Contact with families is discouraged. Why? Because families ask questions. Families demand explanations. Families sometimes try to take their daughters home. His eyes meet yours with the kind of direct honesty that cuts deeper than any lie. And the establishments have invested considerable money in training and housing these girls. They consider it a business investment that must be protected. Business investment. Your daughter has been reduced to a financial transaction, her body and spirit collateral, in an arrangement you never understood you were making. How long do they keep them? Mrs. Yamamoto asks. Until they're no longer profitable, usually 5 to 7 years, sometimes longer. Older girls become managers of younger ones. The cycle continues. 5 to 7 years. Yuki would be 23 or 24 when released. If she survives that long, if she's allowed to leave, if there's anything left of the girl you raised to bring home. What about the letters some families receive? Mrs. Tanaka pulls out her correspondence from Hana. Are these fake? Old man Tanuki examines the elegant handwriting with the practiced eye of someone who's seen many such documents. Written by professional scribes who specialize in family correspondence. The establishments maintain detailed records of each girl's background, her family's education level, their expectations. The letters are crafted to match what each family needs to hear to remain cooperative. Cooperative. You realize now that your songs, your willingness to wait patiently for news that never came, was the goal all along. Compliant mothers don't ask uncomfortable questions or make troublesome visits. Why didn't I receive any letters, you ask? Old man Tanuki's expression grows even sadder. Some girls refuse to allow their names to be used for false correspondence. They prefer their families believe them dead rather than complicit in deception. Prefer their families believe them dead. The words rearrange themselves in your mind until they form a possibility you've never considered. Yuki chose silence to protect you from believing lies about her happiness. Is she... You can't finish the question because the answer might destroy what little strength you have left. I don't know, Old man Tanuki says gently. But I know someone who might be able to help you find out. Hope flickers in your chest like a candle flame in wind. Fragile, likely to be extinguished, but still burning. Who? There's a woman who escaped from Yoshiwara 3 years ago. She helps other families navigate the system, sometimes arranges brief meetings when the guards can be persuaded to look away. Her name is Chio. She works at the flower market near the river. Chio. Another name, another possibility, another thread to pull in the hope of unravelling enough truth to find your daughter. What should we tell her? Tell her old man Tanuki sent you. Tell her you need to find a cherry blossom that's lost its way home. Cherry blossom. Sakura. Even in this place of careful euphemisms and practiced deceptions, someone remembers that your daughter was given a flower name. That she was meant to bloom and fade according to nature's timing, not be plucked and sold before her season arrived. As you leave the tea house, each step feels like walking deeper into a maze with walls that shift when you're not looking. But for the first time in 20 months, you're moving toward the truth instead of away from it. Even if that truth destroys you, at least you'll know what you're grieving. The flower market exists in the early morning hours before the rest of Edo awakens, when vendors arrange their blooms like prayers offered to a god who only speaks in colours and fragrances. You find Chio exactly where old man Tanuki said she would be, tending to arrangements of seasonal flowers, her hands moving with the careful precision of someone who understands that beauty can be both precious and fragile. She's older than you expected, perhaps 30, with eyes that hold too much knowledge for someone who should still be in her prime. When you mention old man Tanuki's name and speak about a cherry blossom that's lost its way home, her hands pause in their work and she looks at you with the recognition of shared wounds. How long has she been missing? Chio asks quietly, not bothering with pretense or euphemisms. 20 months. Chio nods as if this timeline tells her everything she needs to know about your daughter's current situation. Come, we'll speak in the back room where voices don't carry to unwelcome ears. The storage area behind her flower stall is small and dim, filled with buckets of water and the green smell of stems being kept alive. Chio arranges cushions for the three of you, her movements economical, practiced, like someone who's conducted many secret conversations in hidden spaces. I was taken when I was 16, she begins without preamble. From a village not unlike yours, by an official not unlike the one who took your daughters. My parents received letters for 2 years describing my excellent progress in cultural studies. The familiar story unfolds like a nightmare you've heard before, but hearing it from someone who lived through it transforms abstract fears into concrete realities. Chio describes the debt system, the painted faces, the nightly performances for men who saw young women as entertainment to be consumed. How did you escape? Mrs. Tanaka asks. Chio's smile is bitter as winter tea. I didn't escape. I was discarded. The distinction matters more than you initially understand. She explains that after 4 years in Yoshiwara, she became pregnant, a complication that made her temporarily unusable for her primary purpose. Rather than supporting her through pregnancy and childbirth, the establishment sold her contract to a different kind of business, one that specialised in managing women who were no longer suitable for the pleasure trade. What happened to the baby? Mrs. Yamamoto whispers. Born dead? Chio's voice holds the kind of emptiness that comes after all tears have been cried. Perhaps it was a mercy. Children born to women in my situation rarely survive long, and those who do often follow their mothers into the same life. Born dead, perhaps a mercy. The words settle in your stomach like stones, creating a weight you'll carry forever. You think about Yuki at 22, wonder what choices she's been forced to make, what prices she's paid for survival. The woman who owned my new contract was kinder than Mother Okiku, Chio continues. She allowed me to recover, taught me flower arranging, eventually gave me enough freedom to start this small business. But I never forgot the Kumilstan, girls still trapped behind those beautiful gates. Do you help others find their daughters? When I can, but understand, even when families locate their girls, reunion en non is rarely possible. The debts are real, the contract's legally binding. Most daughters have been changed by their experiences in ways that make returning home complicated. Complicated. Another euphemism, but one that carries the weight of psychological damage that can't be repaired with love and good intentions. Can you help us find Yuki? Chio considers the question while arranging chrysanthemums in a ceramic vase, her fingers working automatically while her mind calculates risks and possibilities. Yoshiwara keeps detailed records of all their girls, she says finally. Names, ages, family origins, even physical descriptions. These records are maintained for business purposes, tracking earnings, managing assignments, planning marketing strategies. Marketing strategies. Your daughter has become a product with demographic data and promotional campaigns. I have a contact who occasionally provides information from these records. It's dangerous for him and expensive for me. But sometimes families deserve to know whether they're mourning the dead or searching for the living. Know whether they're mourning the dead or searching for the living. The phrase acknowledges a possibility you've tried not to consider, that some daughters don't survive their first years in Yoshiwara, that death might be preferable to what they endure while alive. How much would this information cost, you ask, though you're not sure you want to hear the answer. More than you have, Chio replies honestly. But I don't require payment in money. I require payment in truth. What kind of truth? When you return to your village, whether you find your daughter or learn she's beyond finding, you must tell other mothers what you've discovered here. You must warn them about government officials bearing contracts and promises. You must help prevent other families from making the same choices you made. The price she's asking feels steeper than money. It requires admitting that you were deceived, that your maternal judgment failed, that you sent your beloved daughter into hell because you believed beautiful lies told by authority figures. But it also offers the possibility of preventing other mothers from lighting incense for daughters who will never write letters, never send money home, never return to explain why they stopped being the girls their families remember. "We agree," Mrs. Yamamoto says, speaking for all three of you. Chio nods and begins preparing a small bundle of flowers. White chrysanthemums for grief, red camellias for lost love, and a single cherry blossom preserved from the previous spring. "Take these to the temple behind Yoshiwara," she instructs. "Light incense for all the daughters who can't speak their own names anymore. Tomorrow morning will you pay for the information that might save their lives?" Chio meets your eyes directly, holding your gaze while she speaks these final words. You see in her expression the weight of 3 years spent helping mothers like you. Some who found their daughters alive but broken, others who learned to grieve properly for the first time. "We'll pay," you whisper, though the price she's asking feels heavier than gold. The information arrives 3 days later, delivered by a boy who can't be more than 12 years old. He hands Chio a small bundle wrapped in plain cloth, accepts a few coins, and disappears into the market crowd before any of you can study his face too closely. Inside the bundle are sheets of rice paper covered in careful handwriting, not the elegant calligraphy of false letters, but the practical script of someone maintaining business records. Chio spreads the documents on a wooden table behind her flower stall, her fingers trembling slightly as she searches for familiar names. "Here," she says quietly, pointing to a line near the middle of the first page. "Yuki, age 17, from the rice farming village of Mizuno. Arrived autumn 1724. Assigned name, Sakura." Your daughter's real name looks strange written in formal characters, as if someone has captured a bird and pinned it to paper, but seeing it there, documented in official records, proves she existed, proves she arrived, proves she was real, and not just a figment of your desperate imagination. "What else does it say?" Mrs. Tanaka asks, though her voice suggests she's not sure she wants to hear the answer. Chio runs her finger along the line, reading silently before speaking aloud. "Initial debt, 15 Rio for transport, housing preparation, clothing and training. Monthly earnings recorded, but also monthly expenses for room, board, dish, cosmetics. Medical care. The mathematics of entrapment unfold before you like a merchant's ledger designed to never balance. For every Rio Yuki earned serving customers, 2 Rio were deducted for costs you never knew existed. The debt didn't decrease, it multiplied like a disease, growing stronger with each month of her captivity. Is she?" You can't finish the question, but Chio understands. According to these records, she was alive as of 6 months ago. The last entry shows her assigned to serve a wealthy silk merchant who became a regular customer. Alive 6 months ago. The information should bring relief, but instead it creates new anxieties. 6 months is enough time for anything to happen. Disease, pregnancy, suicide, or simply the slow destruction of spirit that claims so many girls in Yoshiwara. Mrs. Tanaka finds Hannah's name 3 pages later. The records show a similar pattern of debt expansion, but with one crucial difference. Customer preference noted, shy demeanour, younger appearance, assigned to serve clients who request inexperienced companionship. The euphemism makes Mrs. Tanaka's face go white as rice paper. Clients who request inexperienced companionship aren't seeking cultural conversation or musical performances. Mrs. Yamamoto's daughter Rei appears on the final page, her record marked with a notation that makes Chio pause before reading aloud. Deceased, spring 1726. Cause, fever following childbirth complications. Body delivered to Jukanji Temple for disposal. The words land in the silence like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that expand outward until they touch everything. Rei is dead. Has been dead for over a year while her mother received monthly letters describing her progress in cultural studies. Mrs. Yamamoto doesn't cry, she doesn't speak. She simply reaches out and touches the notation with her fingertip, tracing the characters that record her daughter's death as if she could somehow change the ink back into living breath. "The letters I received," she says finally, her voice hollow as an empty temple bell. "Who was writing them?" The same clerks who write them for all families, Chio explains gently. Some establishments continue correspondence even after a girl dies, gradually transitioning the letters toward explanations of why she can't visit home yet. Eventually they'll send word that she's married a merchant and moved to a distant province, or taken a position with a family that requires complete discretion. The system's cruelty reveals itself as perfectly designed. Families never learn the truth, never stop hoping, never demand investigations or accountability. Dead daughters become fictional success stories, their imaginary happiness used to justify the system that killed them. What about the temple, Mrs. Yamamoto asks, the place where they took her body? Jokanji Temple keeps records of all the women from Yoshiwara, Chio explains, but the names in their books are the flower names, not the real ones. Your daughter would be listed as whatever name she was given when she arrived. Listed under a flower name in a temple that specializes in anonymous graves, as if Rei's true identity was too dangerous to acknowledge even in death. You imagine rows of unmarked stones, each one representing someone's daughter who died far from home, forgotten by everyone except the mothers who still light incense, and whisper prayers to girls who will never answer. Can we visit the temple, you ask? You can visit, Chio replies, but prepare yourselves. The graveyard contains thousands of markers with flower names only. You might never find the specific stone that marks your daughter's rest. Thousands of markers. The number overwhelms your ability to process it emotionally. Thousands of daughters, thousands of mothers who never learned the truth. Thousands of families still waiting for letters that will never come. What about Yuki and Hana? Mrs. Tanaka asks. If they're still alive, is there any way to see them? Chio considers the question while rewrapping the official documents. Sometimes, during cherry blossom season, families are allowed to observe the evening parade from outside the district gates. The girls walk down the main street in their finest clothes, and occasionally, very occasionally, one of them might catch sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Cherry blossoms in Susan. The timing feels cruelly appropriate. Your daughter's named after flowers, displayed during the season when real blossoms bloom and die according to nature's honest schedule. But understand, Chio continues, even if you see them, you cannot call out, cannot approach, cannot make any sign of recognition. The guards watch carefully, and any disruption results in immediate removal and permanent banishment from the area. Observe in silence while your daughter walks past like a living ghost. It's a special kind of torture designed to give families just enough hope to prevent them from taking more decisive action. When is cherry blossom season, you whisper? 3 months from now, Chio replies. If you return to Edo in the spring, I can arrange for you to be in the right place at the right time. 3 months. 3 months to return home, gather more money for another journey, and prepare yourselves emotionally for the possibility of seeing daughters who might not recognize the women you've become while grieving their absence. As you prepare to leave the flower market, Mrs. Yamamoto speaks for the first time since learning about Rei's death. When I return to my village, I'm going to visit every family with daughters. I'm going to tell them about contracts that promise cultural education and deliver death instead. Her voice carries the weight of new purpose, grief transformed into protective anger. You realize this is what Chio meant when she spoke about payment in truth, the obligation to warn others, to break the cycle of beautiful lies that depend on maternal ignorance and trust. We all will, Mrs. Tanaka agrees, though her voice shakes with the magnitude of the task ahead. You nod, clutching the memory of Yuki's name written in the official records, proof that she existed, evidence that she mattered, documentation that transforms her from the ghost haunting your dreams into a real person whose suffering demands acknowledgement. That evening you sit in the same cheap inn where you spent your first night in Edo. But everything has changed. The thin walls that once seemed like inconvenience now feel like protection from a world that has revealed itself to be far crueler than you imagined. The sound of other guests moving about feels like evidence that life continues even when your understanding of it has been fundamentally altered. Mrs. Yamamoto lies on her futon staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow and controlled. She hasn't eaten since learning about Rei's death, hasn't spoken except to confirm travel arrangements for tomorrow's departure. The knowledge that she's been writing responses to letters from a dead daughter for over a year has created a silence too deep for ordinary comfort. Mrs. Tanaka sits by the window holding Hannah's latest letter, the one that mentions expanding her service skills to accommodate distinguished guests with specialised requirements. Now she understands what those words actually mean, and the elegant handwriting seems to mock her previous naivety. "I used to be proud of these letters," she says quietly. "I showed them to neighbours, bragged about my daughter's success in the capital. Other mothers envied me because their daughters never wrote." The irony cuts like broken glass. The mothers who received nothing were actually receiving honesty, while the mothers who received regular correspondence were being fed carefully crafted lies designed to prevent investigation and maintain compliance. You think about your own silence, your daughter's choice to let you believe her dead rather than complicit in deception. It's a different kind of love, the kind that protects through absence rather than false presence. Yuki chose to let you grieve cleanly rather than hope falsely. "What do we tell our husbands?" Mrs. Tanaka asks. "How do we explain what we've learned?" The question hangs in the air like incense smoke that refuses to dissipate. How do you tell a father that his daughter wasn't receiving cultural education, but being forced to provide intimate services to strangers? How do you explain that the government official who seemed so trustworthy was essentially a procurer operating with legal authority? "We tell them the truth," Mrs. Yamamoto says, her voice hollow but determined. "We tell them everything, and we help them understand that we were all victims of the same system." All victims of the same system. The phrase acknowledges what you've slowly been realizing, that parents, daughters, and even some of the customers are caught in a web of exploitation that benefits only the establishments and the officials who enable them. Your husband will blame himself, you know. He'll remember signing the contract, remember believing the promises, remember watching the carriage disappear, and trusting that authority figures had his daughter's best interests at heart. The guilt will settle in his chest like a sturdy and stay there until the day he dies. "There's something else we need to consider," you say slowly. "If we manage to see Yuki and Hannah during cherry blossom season, they might not want to acknowledge us." The possibility has been growing in your mind like a tumour since Chiyo explained the viewing arrangements. Your daughters have survived 20 months in Yoshiwara by becoming people you might not recognise. Painted, trained, perhaps hardened in ways that make returning to village life impossible to imagine. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Tanaka asks, though her tone suggests she's already considered this possibility. "I mean, they might see us and choose to look away. They might prefer that we continue believing them dead, rather than knowing what they've been forced to become. The thought terrifies you more than death, that you might see Yuki in the cherry blossom parade and watch her deliberately avoid your eyes, choosing the protection of anonymity over the risk of recognition. Or, Mrs. Yamamoto adds quietly, they might see us and feel ashamed, not of what was done to them, but of what we allowed to be done by trusting the wrong people. Allowed to be done." The phrase assigns responsibility in a way that feels both unfair and accurate. You didn't know what you were agreeing to, but you did agree. You didn't understand the system, but you participated in it by signing contracts and trusting authority. The flower woman, Chiyo, she said something important, you continue. She said even when families find their daughters, reunion's rarely possible. The experiences have changed them in ways that make returning home complicated. Complicated. You're learning that this word covers a multitude of psychological injuries that have no easy remedies. Young women who've been forced to perform happiness while being exploited don't simply return to being the daughters who left home in government carriages. "So what do we do?" Mrs. Tanaka asks. "Do we go home and pretend this journey never happened? Do we return for cherry blossom season, knowing we might see them but never speak to them?" The questions have no satisfying answers. Every choice available to you involves pain. The pain of not knowing, the pain of knowing too much, the pain of seeing without touching, the pain of speaking truth that destroys other families' comfortable illusions. "We go home," Mrs. Yamamoto says finally. "We tell our husbands what we learned. We warn other families, and then we decide whether to return in spring." Tell our husbands what we learned. The prospect feels like carrying poison home and watching it spread through your household, contaminating every memory of the day you signed those contracts. But the alternative, keeping the truth to yourselves, feels like a betrayal of every daughter still trapped behind Yoshiwara's beautiful gates, every mother still lighting incense for children who might already be dead, every family still believing in government promises designed to facilitate exploitation. As you prepare for sleep, you realise that tomorrow's journey home will be harder than the journey to Edo. You came here hoping to find daughters. You're returning with the knowledge that you might never truly find them again, that the girls who left in that carriage might be gone forever, even if the women they've become are still breathing. Outside your window, the lights of Yoshiwara flicker in the distance like earthbound stars, beautiful, unreachable, and somehow ominous in their splendour. Behind those lights, your daughter might be preparing for another evening of forced smiles and purchased intimacy, her real name buried so deeply she might be forgetting it. Herself. You whisper a prayer to Buddha, asking not for reunion but for Yuki's survival, for her spirit to remain unbroken despite everything she's been forced to endure. It's a different kind of prayer than you've been offering for 20 months. Less hopeful, but more honest. Acknowledging realities you can't change while still affirming love that distance and deception can't destroy. Tomorrow you return home to light incense for a daughter who is both alive and gone, both real and transformed beyond recognition. It's a new kind of grief. Mourning someone who might still be breathing while celebrating memories of someone who might never return. Spring arrives in your village like a promise nobody believes anymore. The cherry trees bloom exactly as they have for centuries, their petals falling like snow that melts before touching the ground. But this year, the sight of blossoms makes your chest tighten with anticipation and dread. Cherry blossom season in Edo means one thing: the chance to see Yuki again, even if she can never see you. 4 months have passed since your return from the capital. 4 months of explaining to your husband why his wife came home with knowledge that destroyed sleep and contaminated dreams. 4 months of visiting other families in surrounding villages, warning mothers about government contracts that promise cultural education and deliver systemic betrayal, enduring maternal love instead. The warnings haven't been received well. Mrs. Sato called you a jealous woman, spreading lies because your own daughter never learned to write proper letters. Mrs. Ishida accused you of trying to sabotage other families' opportunities for advancement. 3 mothers have already signed contracts for their daughters this spring, dismissing your testimony as the bitter fantasies of women who couldn't accept their children's success in the capital. They don't want to hear the truth, your husband observes, as you prepare for another journey to Edo. His cough has worsened over the winter months, but his eyes hold a determination that reminds you why you married him. Truth requires people to admit they might be making terrible mistakes. Terrible mistakes. You've become an expert in this particular category of error, able to recognise the signs in other families with painful clarity. The hope in mothers' eyes when officials speak about cultural opportunities. The pride in fathers' voices when they describe their daughter's future refinement. The trust that authority figures have everyone's best interests at heart. Mrs. Tanaka joins you for this second journey, but Mrs. Yamamoto stays home. Since learning about Rei's death, she's thrown herself into warning others with the fervour of someone trying to outrun her own guilt. She visits 3 villages each week, carrying copies of the official records Chiyo obtained, showing families the mathematics of debt bondage disguised as educational opportunity. I can't watch daughters parade in beautiful clothes knowing they're prisoners, she explained when declining to accompany you. But I can try to prevent other families from sending their girls to the same fate. Try to prevent. The phrase acknowledges what you've all learned, that knowledge doesn't guarantee wisdom, that warnings don't ensure safety, that love sometimes leads people to make choices that destroy the very things they're trying to protect. The journey to Edo feels different this time. You know what awaits at your destination. Not reunion, but the possibility of brief, silent observation. You're travelling 60 miles to spend 30 minutes watching your daughter walk past without acknowledging your existence, then returning home with memories that will have to sustain hope for another year. Chiyo meets you at the flower market exactly as arranged. She's aged visibly in the 4 months since your last meeting, her face carrying new lines that suggest she's helped many mothers navigate the same terrible journey between hope and knowledge. The parade happens tomorrow evening, she explains quietly. During cherry blossom viewing season, the restrictions are slightly relaxed. Families can gather outside the district gates to observe the procession. But remember, no calling out, no waving, no sign of recognition. The guards allow observation only because it creates the illusion that the girls are participating in normal cultural activities. the illusion that the girls are participating in normal cultural activities. Even the viewing is part of the system's elaborate deception, designed to make systemic betrayal, enduring maternal love look like traditional entertainment. How will we recognize them, Mrs. Tanaka asks, if their faces are painted and they're wearing elaborate costumes? You'll know, Chia replies simply. Mothers always know, but prepare yourselves. They might not look like the daughters you remember. 20 months in Yoshiwara changes people in ways that go deeper than makeup and clothing. You've been preparing for this reality intellectually, but the emotional preparation feels impossible. How do you ready yourself to see your beloved daughter transformed into someone whose survival depends on being desired by strangers? That evening, you stand with Mrs. Tanaka and perhaps 50 other people outside Yoshiwara's ornate gates. Some are clearly families like yourselves, older couples clutching each other's hands, eyes scanning every face with desperate intensity. Others appear to be tourists, drawn by curiosity about the famous pleasure district's cherry blossom display. The gates open precisely at sunset, and the procession begins. The first girls to emerge are young, perhaps 15 or 16, their faces painted white as death masks, their lips red as fresh blood. They move with the careful, practiced steps of people who've learned that grace under observation is a survival skill. Behind them come older women, their elaborate kimonos worth more than your family's annual rice income, their expressions serene and unreadable. You scan each face, searching for familiar bone structure beneath the white paint, looking for the way Yuki used to walk or tilt her head when concentrating. Mrs. Tanaka stands beside you doing the same desperate mathematics of recognition, trying to find her daughter among these beautiful painted strangers. Then you see her. Yuki appears in the middle of the procession, wearing a kimono decorated with silver thread that catches torchlight like captured stars. Her face is painted in the traditional style, but you recognize the curve of her jawline, the way she holds her left shoulder slightly higher than her right. Small details that makeup can't alter. She looks older than her 19 years should allow. There's something in her posture that speaks of experiences no teenage girl should possess, a weariness that beautiful clothes can't disguise. But she's alive, walking, breathing, real, in a way that 20 months of wandering could never provide. You want to call her name, want to run toward the procession and pull her out of the line of painted women. Your body actually moves forward half a step before you remember Chio's warnings about guards and permanent banishment. Instead, you stand perfectly still and watch your daughter walk past without looking in your direction. She keeps her eyes focused straight ahead, her expression carefully neutral, giving no sign that she recognizes the woman who gave birth to her, standing just 20 feet away. The moment lasts perhaps 30 seconds, the time it takes for her to walk from one end of your vision to the other. Then she's gone, absorbed back into the procession of beautiful prisoners, leaving you with the memory of silver thread and painted skin and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. Mrs. Tanaka finds Hana near the end of the procession. Her daughter has been transformed even more dramatically than Yuki, her hair styled in elaborate loops held with jade pins, her kimono a masterpiece of purple silk that probably cost more than your family's house. But the transformation goes beyond clothing and cosmetics. Hana moves differently now, with a fluid grace that seems practiced rather than natural. Her smile never wavers, even when no one is looking directly at her. It's become a permanent fixture, painted on as surely as the white makeup that covers her real complexion. When she reaches the spot where you and Mrs. Tanaka stand, something shifts in her expression. Just for a moment, perhaps 3 heartbeats, her eyes move to find her mother's face in the crowd. The painted smile doesn't change, but something behind her eyes flickers with recognition and what might be sorrow. Mrs. Tanaka's hands fly to her mouth to stifle a gasp. She's seen her daughter, and her daughter has seen her. But they're separated by more than the physical distance between sidewalk and procession route. They're separated by a system that makes acknowledgement dangerous for both of them. Hana's gaze moves away as smoothly as it arrived, returning to the middle distance where proper courtesans focus their attention during public appearances. But her left hand, the one hidden from the guards by the angle of her body, makes a small gesture near her waist. A brief touch to her obi, fingers pressed against silk for just a moment longer than necessary. "Did you see that?" Mrs. Tanaka whispers urgently. "The way she touched her obi. That's something she used to do as a child when she was nervous but trying to be brave. A childhood gesture, preserved like a pressed flower hidden beneath layers of forced sophistication. It's a message transmitted in the only language available to them, the language of remembered habits, small signals that carry the weight of everything they can't say aloud. You scan the remaining faces in the procession, hoping for one more glimpse of Yuki, but she doesn't appear again. The parade concludes with musicians in attendance, and then the gates close with a sound like a coffin lid settling into place. The crowd begins to disperse, but you and Mrs. Tanaka remain frozen in place trying to process what you've just witnessed. You saw your daughters, they saw you, but the distance between seeing and touching, between recognition and reunion, might as well be measured in years rather than feet. They looked... Mrs. Tanaka struggles to find words that can encompass the complexity of what you've observed. They looked beautiful and terrible at the same time. Beautiful and terrible. It's an accurate description of the entire Yoshiwara system, designed to create the appearance of elegance while concealing the reality of exploitation. Chiyo appears beside you as if materialized from shadows, her expression carrying the weight of someone who's witnessed many such moments of recognition and separation. "Did you see them?" she asks quietly. "Yes," you whisper, "but they seemed different, older, changed." 20 months in Yoshiwara ages people quickly, Chiyo explains. Your daughters have learned skills no village girl should need. How to smile when their hearts are breaking. How to make men feel desired while feeling nothing themselves. How to survive by becoming someone else entirely. Someone else entirely. The phrase captures your deepest fear, that even if Yuki could somehow return home, the girl who left in the government carriage might be gone forever, replaced by a woman whose experiences have created unbridgeable distance between past and present. But they're alive, Mrs. Tanaka says, as if trying to convince herself that this single fact outweighs all the accompanying complications. They're alive, Chiyo confirms. And they recognized you. That matters more than you might realize. Many girls in their situation begin to convince themselves that their families have forgotten them, that they're truly alone in the world. Seeing you reminds them that they're still loved, still remembered, still someone's daughter despite everything else they've been forced to become. Still someone's daughter despite everything else they've been forced to become. The words offer a different kind of comfort than you expected, not the comfort of happy endings, but the comfort of persistent connection that can't be severed by distance or deception. As you walk back toward your lodging, Mrs. Tanaka shares something that makes your heart both soar and break simultaneously. When Hana touched her obi, she was showing me something. There was a small piece of cloth tucked into her belt, the same pattern as the dress I made for her 16th birthday. She kept it. After everything that's happened to her, she kept a piece of home. A piece of cloth from a dress her mother made, hidden in the elaborate costume of a Yoshiwara courtesan. It's the kind of detail that reveals how daughters preserve love, even when they can't preserve innocence. How memory becomes a form of resistance against systems designed to erase personal history. "What do we do now?" you ask Chiyo as you prepare to part ways once again. "You go home," she replies. "You carry the knowledge that they are alive and that they remember you. You continue warning other families, and if you can gather the resources, you return next year for another 30 seconds of silent recognition." Another 30 seconds of silent recognition. It seems like such a small thing to travel 60 miles and spend precious money to achieve, but those 30 seconds contain everything. Proof of life, evidence of love, confirmation that connection can survive even the most brutal circumstances. "Is there no way to communicate with them?" Mrs. Tanaka asks. "No way to send a message?" Chiyo considers the question carefully before answering. There are occasionally opportunities for very brief, very dangerous communication. Some girls manage to send messages through sympathetic servants or visiting merchants, but any discovered communication results in severe punishment, both for the girl and anyone who helped facilitate contact. Severe punishment. You don't ask for details, but the phrase conjures images that make you grateful for ignorance. Some knowledge is too dangerous to possess, especially when it relates to people you love but can't protect. That night, lying in the same cheap inn where you stayed during your first visit to Edo, you replay those 30 seconds endlessly in your mind. The way Yuki held her shoulders, the silver thread in her kimono, the careful neutrality of her expression. You search for signs of suffering or happiness, for clues about her internal state, for anything that might help you understand how much of your daughter remains beneath the painted surface. But memory provides no easy answers, only the certainty that she exists, and the devastating uncertainty about whether the life she's living can be called living at all. The journey home takes 3 days by ox cart, and every mile feels like travelling backward through time toward a world that will never again feel completely real. You carry within you the image of Yuki and silver-threaded silk, but you also carry the knowledge that the daughter you glimpsed is both completely real and fundamentally transformed. Mrs. Tank sits beside you in the cart, clutching the memory of Hannah's small gesture like a talisman against despair. Neither of you speaks much during the journey. What words could possibly contain the complexity of seeing your children alive but unreachable, present but gone, beautiful but imprisoned? Your husband waits at the village edge when the cart arrives, his face carrying questions he's afraid to ask. The cough that plagued him through winter has worsened, and you realise that worry is literally killing him day by day, each night of wondering about Yuki's fate stealing more life from his lungs. "Did you see her?" he asks simply. "Yes," you reply. "She's alive. She's changed, but alive. Alive, but changed." The phrase will have to encompass everything you can't explain about the painted woman who was once your daughter, the recognition without acknowledgement, the silver thread that caught torchlight like captured tears. That evening, sitting around your small fire, you tell your husband about the cherry blossom procession. You describe Yuki's elaborate kimono, her careful composure, the way she moved with practiced grace through crowds of observers. You don't describe the weariness in her posture, or the knowledge in her eyes that no 19-year-old should possess. "Will you go back next year?" he asks. The question hangs in the air like smoke from burning incense. Will you spend another year, gathering monies for another journey to Edo for another 30 seconds of silent observation? Will you build your entire existence around annual pilgrimages to watch your daughter walk past without speaking? "I don't know," you admit. "Part of me thinks seeing her again might help. Part of me thinks it might drive me completely mad." Drive you completely mad? There's something almost cruel about the cherry blossom viewing. It provides just enough contact to keep hope alive, while simultaneously demonstrating how impossible real reunion has become. Over the following weeks, you continue your efforts to warn other families about the reality behind government contracts promising cultural education. But the task feels increasingly futile. 3 more daughters from surrounding villages have been taken since your return, their families proudly announcing the opportunities their girls will receive in Edo's finest cultural establishments. Mrs. Watanabe shows you the letter she received just days after her 16-year-old daughter, Tsubeki, departed for the capital. "Dear, honoured mother, I write to inform you of my safe arrival and excellent reception at the academy. The other students are refined young ladies from good families, and our teachers are masters of traditional arts. I am learning proper deportment, musical physical skills, and the graceful service of distinguished gentlemen. Please do not worry for my welfare, as I am well cared for in all respects." The letter could have been copied verbatim from any of the dozens Mrs. Tanaka received about Hannah. Same elegant handwriting, same reassuring phrases, same careful balance between providing comfort and preventing investigation. "Doesn't this concern you?" you ask Mrs. Watanabe, pointing to the phrase about graceful service of distinguished gentlemen. "Concern me? Why would proper education in cultural arts concern me?" Mrs. Watanabe's voice carries the defensive tone of someone who suspects criticism but refuses to acknowledge doubt. "My daughter is learning skills that will make her an excellent wife to a man of quality. An excellent wife to a man of quality." The phrase reveals how deeply the system's lies have penetrated rural communities. Families genuinely believe they're providing their daughters with marriage preparation, rather than systemic betrayal, enduring maternal love training. 6 months after the cherry blossom viewing, you receive unexpected news that changes everything. A travelling merchant brings word that fire has swept through part of Yoshiwara, destroying several buildings and forcing the evacuation of numerous establishments. Some girls were relocated to other districts, others were sold to different kinds of businesses, and a few, Just a few managed to escape during the chaos. "Which buildings burned?" you ask the merchant, your heart pounding with hope and terror in equal measure. "I don't know the specific names," he admits, "but I heard the fire started near the main street where the cherry blossom trees are planted. Several of the larger establishments were damaged." The main street where the cherry blossom trees are planted, exactly where you saw Yuki walking in her silver-threaded kimono. The fire might have destroyed the building where she lived, might have killed her, might have freed her, might have made her situation even worse. You have no way of knowing which possibility has become reality, no way of gathering information about her fate without returning to Edo and conducting another dangerous investigation. The uncertainty feels worse than the previous months of knowing she was trapped but alive. At least then you could picture her somewhere specific, doing specific things, surviving in ways you could imagine. Now she could be anywhere, in any condition, facing any fate. The fire has introduced new variables into an equation that was already impossible to solve, new fears into a situation that was already saturated with anxiety. Mrs. Tanaka receives the same news about the fire, and together you face the same tall, terrible question. Do you return to Edo immediately to search for information, wait until next cherry blossom season, to see if they appear in the procession, or accept that you might never know what happened to your daughters? "I can't wait another year," Mrs. Tanaka says. "If Hana is alive and free, she might be aiming to find her way home. If she's dead, I need to know so I can grieve properly. If she's been moved somewhere worse, I need to know that too." Need to know. The phrase captures the impossible position of mothers who've learned too much to remain ignorant but not enough to take effective action. Knowledge has become both a necessity and a torment, essential for sanity but destructive to peace. That night, you lie awake calculating the cost of another journey to Edo. The money you'd been saving for next year's cherry blossom viewing could fund an immediate investigation. But if you spend it now and learn nothing useful, you'll have no resources for future attempts at contact. Outside your window, early autumn winds strip leaves from trees that will bloom again in spring. If they survive the winter, if conditions remain favourable, if nothing unexpected destroys their roots or branches before the season of a renewal arrives. Like your hope of seeing Yukaoi again, the tree's future blossoms depend on countless variables beyond your control, countless forces that could either nurture growth or destroy it entirely. All you can do is tend the roots, protect what you can protect, and wait for spring to reveal whether anything beautiful will emerge from the long season of uncertainty. The decision to return to Edo immediately rather than wait for spring comes when Mrs. Tanaka collapses in her kitchen 3 days after hearing about the fire. She's found by a neighbour, unconscious on the floor, clutching one of Hannah's letters so tightly the paper has torn. The village doctor declares it nervous exhaustion brought on by prolonged worry, but you recognise it as something deeper, the systematic destruction of hope that occurs when uncertainty becomes unbearable. "I dream about her burning," Mrs. Tanaka whispers from her sickbed. "I see Hana trapped in a building full of flames, calling for help that never comes. I wake up smelling smoke that isn't there." The dreams have consumed her ability to function normally. She can't eat without imagining her daughter hungry, can't sleep without seeing fire, can't perform simple household tasks without wondering if Hannah is alive to perform similar tasks wherever she might be now. "We have to go," she insists, though she can barely sit upright without assistance. "Even if the journey kills me, I have to know what happened to her." "Even if the journey kills me." The phrase reveals how completely maternal love can override self-preservation when children are in danger, or might be in danger, or might already be dead. Your husband argues against the journey, pointing out that Mrs. Tanaka is too ill to travel, and that fire damage might make information gathering even more difficult than before. But his arguments are undermined by his own deteriorating health, the cough that rattles his chest like dice in a broken cup, the weight loss that makes his clothes hang like burial shrouds. "If you don't go now," he admits quietly, "I might not live to help you make another attempt next year." The acknowledgement of his mortality settles between you like a third presence in the room, demanding recognition of realities you've been avoiding. The system that took your daughter is also destroying your husband. Day by day, breath by breath, hope by hope. 3 weeks later, you and Mrs. Tanaka begin the journey out to Edo despite her continued weakness and your husband's worsening condition. The ox cart bounces over ruts that seem designed to inflict maximum discomfort, and Mrs. Tanaka vomits twice before you've travelled 5 miles. But determination born from desperation makes people capable of enduring almost anything. She grips the cart's wooden sides and focuses on the horizon, as if she can will herself toward answers through pure maternal resolve. The Edo you encounter this time feels different. Smaller, somehow, less overwhelming. Perhaps you've grown more sophisticated during your previous visits, or perhaps knowledge of the city's hidden cruelties has stripped away the mystique that once made it seem magical. Chio greets you at the flower market with an expression that immediately confirms your worst fears. She's aged years in the months since your last meeting, her face carrying new lines that speak of too many mothers asking impossible questions about daughters who might be beyond finding. The fire was worse than the initial report suggested, she says without preamble. 7 buildings were completely destroyed, including 3 of the largest establishments. Many girls were relocated to other districts, but some... She pauses, searching for words that can convey tragedy without destroying hope entirely. Some were never accounted for. Never accounted for. The euphemism covers a multitude of possibilities. Death by fire, death by smoke, death during evacuation, or simply disappearance into the chaos that follows disasters in places where human beings are treated as disposable property. What about the records, will you ask? The books that showed which girls were in which buildings? Most records were stored in the main administrative building, which survived the fire. But the chaos during evacuation meant that some girls were moved before their transfers could be properly documented. The official explanation is that everyone was safely relocated, but Chio shrugs with the weary acceptance of someone who's learned not to trust official explanations. Official explanations versus reality, the same gap that enabled the entire system of deception from the beginning. Authorities who traffic in beautiful lies aren't suddenly compelled to tell ugly truths just because buildings burn and people die. Can you find out which buildings burned? Mrs. Tanaka asks, her voice barely above a whisper. I've already made inquiries, Chio replies, pulling a small piece of paper from her sleeve. The establishments destroyed included the House of Evening Glory, the Garden of Autumn Leaves, and the Palace of Silver Moonlight. She reads the names like a priest reciting prayers for the dead, each one representing dozens of young women whose fates have become even more uncertain than before. Do you know which buildings Yuki and Hana were in, you ask, though part of you doesn't want to hear the answer. Chio consults another paper covered in her careful handwriting. According to the records I obtained during your previous visit, Yuki was assigned to the House of Evening Glory. Hana was at the Garden of Autumn Leaves. Both names appear on the list of destroyed buildings. The information settles in your stomach like swallowed stones. Your daughters were in establishments that no longer exist, relocated to unknown locations, or possibly killed in fires that might have burned so hot that bodies left no trace worth recording. Mrs. Tanaka makes a sound like air being forced from lungs. Not quite a sob, not quite a scream, but something that contains elements of both. She doubles over as if the news has physically struck her, her hands pressed against her stomach like she's trying to hold her organs in place. But this doesn't mean they're dead, Chio says quickly. Many girls were successfully evacuated and transferred to other districts. The problem is that the chaos disrupted normal record keeping, so tracking specific individuals has become nearly impossible. Nearly impossible rather than completely impossible. The distinction offers just enough hope to prevent total despair while acknowledging the reality that finding your daughters might now require more resources and luck than you can possibly arrange. Where would they have been taken, you ask? There are pleasure districts in other parts of Edo, and some girls are sent to establishments in distant cities where their debts can be transferred to new owners. Without access to the evacuation records, which are kept confidential by the authorities, there's no way to trace specific relocations. No way to trace specific relocations. Your daughters have become needles in a haystack the size of all Japan, moved by forces you can't track to places you can't identify for reasons you'll never be told. What about the temple? Mrs. Tanaka asks suddenly. The place where they take the bodies. If some girls died in the fire. Jokanji Temple received 17 bodies from the fire, Chio confirms grimly. But as always, they are recorded only by their flower names, and some bodies were too damaged by fire to be reliably identified. 17 bodies, recorded by flower names only, some too damaged by fire to be reliably identified. The information transforms the temple from a place of potential answers into another source of uncertainty. Even death has been made anonymous by a system that treats young women like interchangeable commodities. You realise that you might never know what happened to Yuki. She might be dead and buried under a false name, alive and trapped in a distant city, or existing in some liminal state where survival depends on forgetting she was ever someone's beloved daughter. The fire has taken your one reliable source of information, the annual cherry blossom procession, and replaced it with chaos that might never resolve into comprehensible narrative. The next morning, Chio leads you through Edo's streets toward the burned district, warning you repeatedly about what you're about to witness. Fire damage in Yoshiwara isn't just architectural, she explains as you walk past normal businesses and residences. It's also psychological. The survivors often refuse to speak about what they experienced, and the witnesses describe scenes that sound like Buddhist hell realms. Buddhist hell realms? The comparison suggests suffering so intense it transcends ordinary human experience. The kind of torment that breaks minds as well as bodies. The smell reaches you before the visual damage comes into view. Smoke has settled into wood and stone and fabric like a permanent haunting, creating an atmosphere that makes every breath feel like inhaling the residue of destroyed lives. What remains of the House of Evening Glory looks like a giant's broken teeth, charred wooden beams pointing towards sky that seems permanently grey above this particular patch of earth. The house's famous cherry trees, transplanted each spring for the entertainment of visitors, are now blackened skeletons that will never bloom again. Mrs. Tanaka stands before the ruins where her daughter might have lived for 20 months, her face displaying the kind of emptiness that comes when grief becomes too large for ordinary emotional expression. She doesn't cry. Crying requires energy she no longer possesses. "Hannah was here," she whispers to the ashes. "My daughter was in this place." Was here, might still be here, might have escaped from here. The possibilities multiply like cracks in broken glass, each one sharp enough to cut hope into smaller and smaller pieces. A woman approaches you from the shadows of a partially damaged building. She's perhaps 40 years old, with burn scars along her left arm, and a limp that suggests injury during evacuation. Her clothes mark her as someone who works in the pleasure district. Not elegant enough to be a courtesan, not rough enough to be a labourer. "You're looking for daughters," she says simply. It's not a question. "Yes," you reply. "Two girls who are at the House of Evening Glory and the Garden of Autumn Leaves." The woman nods with the weary understanding of someone who's had this conversation before. "I worked at evenings. Glory as a house servant, I was there the night of the fire." A witness, the first person you've encountered who might have actual knowledge rather than speculation about what happened during the evacuation. "What did you see?" Mrs. Tanaka asks, her voice barely audible. "Chaos," the woman replies. "Fire spreads faster than panic in buildings where people sleep behind locked doors. Some girls got out quickly because they were already awake serving customers in the main rooms. Others were trapped in sleeping quarters where the doors had been secured for the night." Doors that had been secured for the night. A safety measure that became a death trap when fire made quick escape essential. The same system that prevented girls from leaving voluntarily also prevented them from fleeing when their lives depended on it. "Do you remember specific girls?" you ask, though you're not sure you want to hear the answer. The woman considers the question carefully. "I remember some. There was a girl called Sakura. Very young, maybe 19, with sad eyes that seemed older than her face. She was in the East Wing when the fire started." Sakura. Yuki's flower name. "Your daughter was in the East Wing when fire began consuming the building, where she'd been trapped for 20 months. What happened to her?" The question emerges from your throat like a prayer offered to a god who specializes in cruelty. "I don't know," the woman admits. "The East Wing was evacuated last because the fire blocked the main corridor. Some girls got out through windows, some were carried out unconscious, some..." She doesn't finish the sentence, leaving space for the possibilities too terrible to voice. "Some died. Some were burned beyond recognition. Some escaped but were so badly injured they died later. Some survived physically, but were so damaged psychologically they're no longer the people they used to be." "What about a girl called Chrysanthemum?" Mrs. Tanaka asks, using Hannah's flower name. "From the Garden of Autumn Leaves." "I didn't work at the garden, but I heard..." The woman pauses, clearly reluctant to share certain information. I heard that building collapsed before most of the girls could be evacuated. The fire moved too fast and the wooden structure couldn't support the damage. Collapsed before most of the girls could be evacuated. The words arranged themselves in your mind like stones marking a grave. Heavy, permanent, impossible to rearrange into more hopeful configurations. Mrs. Tanaka makes a small noise that might have started as Hannah's name but gets lost somewhere between her heart and her throat. She sways on her feet, and you realise she's about to collapse. The woman notices Mrs. Tanaka's distress and speaks more gently, but many girls survived. The chaos was so complete that some who were presumed dead later turned up alive in other districts. Records were lost, names were confused, people were displaced in ways that made tracking difficult. Girls survived. Records were lost. Tracking became difficult. Threads of hope woven through a tapestry of devastation. Just enough possibility to prevent complete despair. Is there any way to find out who survived, you ask? The authorities won't release evacuation lists. They claim it's for the survivors' protection. But sometimes information leaks through servants who moved between establishments, or merchants who helped transport displaced girls to new locations. Information that leaks through servants and merchants, the same informal networks that brought you news of the fire in the first place. Unreliable, but sometimes the only sources available when official channels are closed. How much would such information cost? Mrs. Tanaka asks, though she can barely stand upright. More than money, the woman replies. It costs time, patience, and the willingness to hear news you might not want to receive. And even then, you might learn nothing definitive. Just rumours and possibilities that create new kinds of uncertainty. New kinds of uncertainty to replace the old kinds, hope that shifts shape without necessarily becoming more substantial. You're beginning to understand that seeking truth about your daughters might be an endless process of discovering new ways to be unsure about their fates. As you prepare to leave the burned district, you notice something that makes your heart stop completely. Among the debris scattered around the House of Evening Glory's ruins, you spot a small piece of fabric, silk thread in a pattern you recognise because you watched your daughter admire it in a market years ago. It might be from Yuki's kimono. It might be from any of dozens of silk garments destroyed in the fire. It might be nothing significant at all, but you pick it up anyway, folding the singed fabric carefully into your sleeve next to your heart, where it joins the cloth doll Yuki left behind and the memory of silver thread catching torchlight during the cherry blossom parade. Evidence, or the hope of evidence, or simply the need to carry something physical that might have touched your daughter's life, however briefly. The fragment of silk burns in your sleeve like a coal that produces no warmth, only constant awareness of its presence. You've carried it for 3 days now, pulling it out periodically to examine the pattern. Cherry blossoms embroidered in silver thread, the kind of expensive detail that adorned the kimono you saw Yuki wearing during the spring procession. But silk is silk, and cherry blossom patterns are common in the pleasure districts. The fabric might have come from any of dozens of garments destroyed in the fire, might have belonged to any of the women who lived and worked and died in those burning buildings. The uncertainty has become a form of torture more refined than simple ignorance. At least when you knew nothing, your imagination could create comforting lies. Now you know just enough to understand how much you don't know, how many variables exist between hope and despair. Mrs. Tanaka has grown worse since visiting the ruins. She barely speaks, barely eats, barely acknowledges the world around her. She sits in your shared room at the inn, holding one of Hannah's letters, reading the same elegant lies over and over, as if repetition might transform false hope into true knowledge. My daughter might be dead, she says suddenly, on the 4th morning, her voice carrying the hollow quality of someone testing painful truths. She might have burned to death, calling my name, and I'll never know. Might be dead, might have suffered, might have died alone. The possibilities multiply like disease, contaminating every attempt at peace or acceptance. Or she might be alive in another city, wondering if we've forgotten her, you reply, though the alternative brings no more comfort than Mrs. Tanaka's darker speculation. Chiyo visits your inn that afternoon with information that costs her considerable risk to obtain. Her contact within the Pleasure District Administration has provided partial evacuation records, not official documents, but notes scribbled by clerks during the chaos, fragments of information that might or might not be accurate. The House of Evening Glory evacuated 37 girls, she reports quietly. 17 were transferred to establishments in other districts within Edo. 12 were sold to operations in distant cities. 5 were found dead, 3 are listed as unaccounted for. 37 girls total, with Yuki falling into one of the categories. Transferred locally, sold to distant operations, found dead, or unaccounted for. The mathematics of uncertainty. 1 chance in 4 that she's dead. 1 in 4 that she's lost to distances you can't bridge. 1 in 4 that she's still in Edo but hidden from you. 1 in 4 that no one knows where she is, or what happened to her. What about the Garden of Autumn Leaves? Mrs. Tanaka asks, though her voice suggests she's not sure she wants to hear the answer. 24 girls evacuated. 8 transferred locally, 6 sold to distant operations, 7 found dead, 3 unaccounted for. 7 found dead out of 24, worse odds than the House of Evening Glory, but still leaving possibilities for survival. Hana falls into the same categories of uncertainty as Yuki, the same mathematical distribution between hope and grief. The unaccounted for, you ask. What does that mean exactly? Girls who disappeared during the evacuation chaos. They might have escaped on their own, might have been taken by unauthorized persons, might have died in ways that prevented body recovery, might have been relocated without proper documentation. Disappeared during chaos, a phrase that covers everything from successful escape to murder to simple record-keeping failures. The unaccounted for exist in a liminal space between life and death, presence and absence, hope and despair. Is there any way to search for girls who might have escaped on their own? Mrs. Tanaka asks. Chio shakes her head slowly. Girls who successfully escape the pleasure districts don't usually announce their presence. They change their names, move to distant areas, try to build new lives without reference to their past experiences. Survival often requires becoming invisible. Becoming invisible as a survival strategy. It makes sense, but it also means that successful escape might be indistinguishable from death, from a family's perspective. Your daughters might be alive and free somewhere, deliberately hiding from any connection to their former lives. What would you do, you ask Chio, if they were your daughters? The question hangs in the air between you like incense smoke, carrying the weight of 2 years' worth of accumulated decisions and their consequences. I would go home, Chio says finally. I would accept that I might never know their fates with certainty. I would honour their memory by preventing other families from making the same choices I made. And I would light incense every evening for daughters who might be alive or dead, or somewhere between the two. Go home and accept uncertainty. Honour memory through prevention. Light incense for daughters who exist in quantum states of maybe. It's not the answer you wanted, but it might be the answer you need. That evening, you and Mrs. Tanaka sit in your room making the decision that will determine the rest of your lives. Do you remain in Edo searching for information that might not exist about daughters who might not be findable? Do you return home and build lives around annual pilgrimages to cherry blossom viewings that might never again include the faces you're desperate to see? Do you accept that love sometimes requires releasing the beloved into uncertainties that can't be resolved through maternal determination? I can't search forever, Mrs. Tanaka admits, but I can't stop searching either. The not knowing is killing me, but the possibility of abandoning her when she might need help is worse than death. The not knowing versus the possibility of abandonment, 2 forms of torment that compete for the privilege of destroying what remains of your peace. You realise that there might be no good choices available, only different ways of carrying grief that refuses to resolve into manageable forms. Outside your window, Edo continues its daily existence. Merchants selling goods, children playing games, families sharing evening meals around fires that provide warmth instead of destruction. Normal life proceeds normally, while you sit suspended between hope and despair, held in place by love that has become too heavy to carry and too precious to abandon. The fragment of silk in your sleeve might be from Yuki's kimono, might be evidence of her presence in that burned building, might be proof that she existed in the place where she might have died, or it might be nothing more than debris from someone else's destroyed life, carrying no more meaning than the ash that coats everything in the burned district. You'll probably never know which possibility is true, And learning to live with that uncertainty might be the final lesson in a course of education that began the day you signed the government contract and watched your daughter disappear into a carriage bound for beautiful lies and ugly truths. The decision to return home comes not from resolution but from exhaustion. The slow recognition that searching for certainty about your daughter's fates might destroy what remains of your own lives without bringing them any closer to safety or freedom. Mrs. Tanaka can barely walk without assistance, and your own reserves of physical and emotional strength are approaching dangerous depletion. We've learned what we can learn, you tell Chio during your final meeting at the flower market. Now we have to decide how to live with that knowledge. How to live with knowledge that creates more questions than answers, information that illuminates suffering without providing solutions, truth that makes previous ignorance seem like a form of mercy. Chio helps you purchase supplies for the journey home, but she also provides something more valuable. A small network of contacts in villages along your route, people who might hear news about displaced girls from the pleasure districts, merchants who sometimes carry information about women seeking to return to families they left years ago. Hope changes shape, she explains as she writes down names and locations. It might not look like what you expected, but it doesn't always die completely. Hope that changes shape rather than disappearing entirely. The possibility that your daughters might someday find ways to send word, see help, or even attempt to return home despite everything that's been done to them, and everything they've chosen to carry forward into whatever remains of your lives. Write to me if you ever learn anything, she adds, pressing a small bundle into your hands. Sometimes news travels through merchant routes in ways that official channels don't allow. And remember, lighting incense for daughters who might be alive is still an act of love, even if they never smell the smoke. Lighting incense for daughters who might be alive. The phrase reframes prayer as an act of faith that transcends certainty. Love that doesn't require proof of its reception to remain valid. The journey home feels longer than any distance you've ever travelled. Not because of miles, but because of the weight you're carrying. In your sleeve, a fragment of silk that might have touched your daughter's skin. In your memory, the image of Yuki walking in silver-threaded splendour, alive but unreachable. In your heart, the terrible knowledge that maternal love sometimes means accepting that you can't save the children you die to protect. Mrs. Tanaka barely speaks during the 3-day journey, but when she does, her words carry the hollow quality of someone whose world has shifted so fundamentally that ordinary language no longer fits her experience. I understand now why some mothers go mad, she says on the 2nd day, watching rice fields pass by the cart window. It's not the loss that breaks you. It's the not knowing. The mind can accept death, but it can't process maybe. The mind can't process maybe, an insight that explains why uncertainty has become more torturous than grief. Why questions without answers feel more unbearable than statements that end in periods rather than question marks. Your village appears on the horizon, like a memory of a life you used to live, familiar but somehow foreign after everything you've learned about the world beyond its borders. The houses look smaller, the problems more manageable, the daily rhythms innocent in their predictability. Your husband waits at the village edge, his face asking questions his voice isn't strong enough to voice. The cough has worsened during your absence, and you realise with a shock that he might not survive another winter, that your search for one family member might cost you another. Did you find her? He asks simply. We found possibilities, where you reply, we found maybe. The months that follow your return settle into a rhythm of impossible normalcy. You perform the daily tasks of village life, tending gardens, preparing meals, maintaining the household, while carrying within you knowledge that makes every ordinary moment feel like an elaborate performance for an audience that doesn't know the real story. Mrs. Tanaka recovers slowly from her physical collapse, but something essential has been permanently altered in her relationship with Hope. She still lights incense for Hannah each evening, but now she whispers different prayers, not requests for safe return, but appeals for peace, regardless of where or how her daughter exists. I'm mourning someone who might still be breathing, she explains during one of your visits, grieving a loss that might not have happened while preparing for news that might never come. It's like being asked to calculate the weight of maybe, mathematics that can't be solved because the variables keep changing, equations where x equals everything and nothing simultaneously. Your husband's health continues to deteriorate, the cough becoming a permanent soundtrack to your daily life. On particularly bad nights, you hear him whispering apologies to an empty room. Sorry for signing the contract, sorry for trusting authority, sorry for letting his daughter disappear into government promises that proved to be beautifully crafted lies. If I die before she comes home, tells you one evening, while you prepare his medicine, will you tell her that I never stopped believing she was good? That whatever happened to her, whatever she was forced to become, I never stopped seeing the little girl who used to help me. Plant rice and catch fireflies? Never stopped seeing the little girl beneath whatever the woman has become. The kind of love that recognises essence despite transformations. That holds space for the original person, even when circumstances have required them to become someone else entirely. You promise him this, though you don't know if you'll ever have the opportunity to deliver such a message. Death might claim him before news of Yuki arrives, or news might never arrive at all, leaving promises suspended in the same liminal space where your daughter exists, neither fulfilled nor broken, just held in permanent anticipation. The seasonal rhythms continue around your personal catastrophe. Rice grows and is harvested, cherry blossoms bloom and fall, new babies are born to families who still believe the world is fundamentally safe for daughters. And occasionally, government officials appear in surrounding villages, bearing contracts and promises that sound exactly like the ones that took Yuki away. You and Mrs. Tanaka have developed a grim efficiency in your warning efforts. When word comes that recruiters are approaching, you visit every family with daughters, carrying copies of Chiyo's records and testimonies from your journey to Edo. But success remains limited. Hope is stronger than fear in parents who want to believe their children can escape the limitations of village life. They think we're bitter women spreading lies to ruin other families' opportunities, Mrs. Tanaka observes after another fruitless afternoon of warnings. They can't imagine that authority figures would lie so systematically, that official documents could be designed to deceive rather than protect. Can't imagine systematic deception from authority figures, the same naivety that enabled your own participation in the system, the same trust that makes other families vulnerable to the same beautiful lies that destroyed your household's peace. 6 months after your return from Edo, unexpected news arrives through the merchant networks Chiyo described. A travelling silk trader brings word that several girls matching descriptions of fire survivors have been seen in a port city 200 miles south, working in establishments that cater to foreign sailors and merchants. The information is vague, third-hand, possibly unreliable. The girls might be your daughters, might be other families' missing children, might be young women who chose that life rather than having it forced upon them. But it's the first concrete lead you've received since the fire, the first suggestion that some thread might still connect you to Yuki's current existence. "Do we go?" Mrs. Tanaka asks, though her voice suggests she already knows the answer is beyond her physical capabilities. You look at your husband, who can barely walk to the village centre without stopping to rest, then at Mrs. Tanaka, whose collapse in Edo demonstrated how close she is to complete breakdown. The mathematics are simple. You don't have the resources, financial, physical or emotional, for another search that might yield nothing more than additional uncertainty. We write letters, you decide. We send inquiries through the merchant who brought the news. We ask Chiyo to investigate from her end, but we don't travel 200 miles on the strength of maybe. Don't travel on the strength of maybe, a decision that feels like abandonment and wisdom simultaneously, giving up and growing up, accepting limitations while maintaining love. That night you compose the first letter you've written since Yuki disappeared. The characters feel strange under your brush, formal Japanese that you're not sure you're writing correctly, but you persist because words on paper feel more substantial than hopes carried only in the memory. To any establishment owner or merchant who might have knowledge of a young woman called Sakura, originally from Mizuno village, her mother lights incense for her every evening and prays for her safety regardless of circumstances. If she lives and remembers home, tell her she is loved without condition. If she has died, tell her so we can grieve properly. If she exists somewhere between life and death, know that her family has not forgotten her name or her worth. You fold the letter carefully, seal it with wax from your evening candle, and entrust it to networks that might carry words across distances your body can no longer bridge. It's a different kind of searching, passive rather than active, accepting rather than demanding, loving rather than controlling. You're learning that sometimes maternal devotion means releasing children into mysteries you can't solve, rather than destroying yourself in pursuit of answers that might not exist. 2 years pass. Your husband dies during the winter of the third year after Yuki's departure. His final words a whispered apology to a daughter who couldn't hear him. Forgive himself for choices made from love and ignorance in equal measure. You bury him in the village cemetery under a stone that bears both his name and hers, marking a grave that holds one body but mourns two losses. Mrs. Tanaka follows him 6 months later, her heart simply stopping one morning, while she knelt before her family altar, lighting incense for Hana. The village doctor calls it natural causes, but you know better. She died of questions that had no answers, hope that had no resolution, love that had nowhere to go except into prayer smoke that disappeared into empty sky. You're alone now, the last keeper of memories that no one else shares, the sole witness to the moment when government promises transformed into family destruction, the weight of being the only person who remembers how Yuki laughed when she was nervous, how she always touched your hand before eating to make sure you'd been served first, how she used to practice writing her name in the dirt with sticks when she thought no one was watching. But loneliness has taught you something unexpected about love, that it doesn't require the presence of the beloved to remain real, doesn't need response to maintain its power, doesn't depend on resolution to justify its existence. You love Yuki exactly as much whether she's alive in a distant city, dead in an unmarked grave, or existing in some state between the two that has no name. The incense you light each evening has become a different kind of ritual now. Instead of bargaining with Buddha for her safe return, you simply acknowledge her continued presence in your heart. Instead of asking for news, you offer gratitude for the 19 years you had with her, before the world revealed its capacity for beautiful cruelty. I don't know where you are tonight, you whisper to the smoke that carries your words toward whatever realm daughters occupy when they disappear from government carriages. I don't know if you remember my face or the sound of my voice when I used to sing you to sleep. I don't know if you're safe, if you're happy, if you're still the girl who cried when we had to kill the chickens for dinner. The smoke rises steadily, carrying words that might never reach their intended destination, but serve their purpose simply by being spoken aloud. But I know this. You were loved completely during every moment of your life that I was privileged to witness. You were wanted, celebrated, treasured, in ways that government contracts can't diminish and distance can't destroy. Whatever you've been forced to become, whatever survival is required of you, whatever choices you've made in circumstances I can't imagine, none of it changes the truth of how perfectly you fit in my arms when you were small, how your first word was mama, how you used to save the sweetest pieces of fruit for me, even when you were still hungry. The truth of perfect fit. First words, saved sweetness. Love documented in details too small for official records, but too essential for forgetting. Memories that prove a person's worth regardless of what the world does to them afterward. Sometimes you receive letters from Chio, updates on her continued efforts to help other mothers navigate systems designed to separate families and profit from their desperation. She's established a network of women who warn rural villages about recruitment practices, who provide shelter for girls who manage to escape the pleasure districts, who document the real stories behind government promises. Your daughter's name is written in our records, one letter informs you. Not as Sakura, but as Yuki, remembered as someone's beloved child, honoured as a person who mattered before she became a commodity. If she ever finds her way to any of our safe houses, she'll know immediately that her family never stopped loving her. Never stopped loving her. Words that transform names in record books into bridges across impossible distances. Documentation that love persists even when people disappear. On the 5th anniversary of Yuki's departure, you make a decision that surprises even yourself. Instead of travelling to Edo for another futile search, you visit every village within a day's walk, speaking to every mother with daughters about the reality behind cultural education contracts. This time people listen. Perhaps because you're older now, carrying authority that comes from surviving unthinkable loss. Perhaps because Mrs. Tanaka's death has removed any suspicion that you're spreading lies from jealousy. Perhaps because 5 years of additional disappearances have created enough doubt about government promises to make families receptive to warnings they previously dismissed. The official will come to your village, you tell mothers who still believe the world is safe for daughters. He'll wear fine clothes and speak elegant words about opportunities in the capital. He'll show you contracts with official seals and promise that your daughter will write letters describing her happiness and success. You pause, letting them imagine the scene, remembering your own excitement when such possibilities first seemed real. But here's what he won't tell you. Those letters are written by professional scribes who never met your daughter. The education is training in providing intimate services to men who pay for access to young women's bodies. The opportunities are debt bondage disguised as cultural refinement. The safe return home depends on surviving years of exploitation that ages girls into women who might not recognize themselves in mirrors. The truth delivered without decoration. Brutal honesty that serves as vaccination against beautiful lies. How can you be certain? Asks a mother whose 16-year-old daughter has been asking about life beyond the village. Because I signed the contract, you reply simply. Because I believed the promises. Because I sent my beloved Yuki to what I thought was educational opportunity, and what turned out to be systematic betrayal, enduring maternal love 18 to 19 managed by people who understand exactly how much mothers love their children, and how that love can be weaponized against families. Weaponized love, the phrase that captures how the system uses maternal devotion as a tool for enabling systematic violation, how the desire to provide better opportunities becomes the mechanism for destroying children's lives. Some mothers thank you for the warning. Others dismiss you as a bitter woman spreading paranoid fantasies. But several, enough to matter, decide to keep their daughters home, to find other ways of providing opportunities that don't require signing contracts with authorities who profit from family separation. That evening, as you light incense for Yuki, you realise that saving other daughters has become your way of honouring yours. You can't rescue the girl who disappeared in a government carriage, but you can prevent other carriages from filling with other beloved children. I couldn't protect you, you whisper to the smoke that carries your words into darkness. But I'm protecting them. Every mother who decides to keep her daughter home is a small victory in your name. Every family that stays intact is a prayer answered in your honour. The incense burns down to ash, leaving only the scent of sandalwood and the certainty that love transcends presence, that devotion doesn't require reunion, that some lights continue burning even when the person who lit them has disappeared beyond the reach of sight. Outside your window, stars appear in patterns that remain constant despite everything that changes beneath them. Somewhere under this same sky, Yuki might be looking upward and remembering the woman who taught her to name constellations, who sang lullabies that mentioned every star visible from their small village. Or she might not be looking up at all. She might be gone in ways that make stargazing impossible. But the stars shine regardless, and love persists regardless. And somewhere in the space between memory and hope, mothers and daughters remain connected by bonds that distance can't break and time can't diminish, and systems can't destroy, no matter how beautifully they disguise their cruelty, or how efficiently they profit from breaking hearts that trusted them to protect what they loved most. The light never dies, it just changes shape, burning in new places, carried by different hands, passed between women who understand that sometimes the most powerful act of love is lighting candles for daughters who might never see the flame, but whose worth illuminates the darkness anyway.